Please take your seats. The meeting is about to begin. Remember to speak into the microphone, as this meeting is being recorded for public record. Please stand by. We are going on air in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's meeting of the Land Use and Sustainability Committee. Today's meeting of the committee will be conducted in a hybrid format with members of the committee physically present in the commission chambers at Miami Beach City Hall and staff and members of the public appearing either in person or virtually via Zoom. To participate virtually, members of the public may dial 888-475-4499 and enter the webinar ID, which is 8505-9923. 037#, or log into the Zoom app and enter the webinar ID, which again is 8505-9923-037. Anyone wishing to speak on an item must click the raise hand icon on the Zoom app or dial *9 if participating by phone. With that, I'm going to recognize our city attorney to establish quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll do a roll call. Commissioner Dominguez.
Present.
Commissioner Suarez.
Here.
Vice Chair Bott.
Aye.
And Chairman Fernandez.
Present.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. And I want to thank our colleague, Commissioner Joseph Magazine, for joining us as well, even though he's not a member of the committee. And I also want to welcome our interim assistant city manager, David Martinez, who together with our planning director, Tom Mooney, will be serving as liaisons to this committee. Welcome, Mr. Assistant City Manager. And Mr. Planning Director, do we have any changes for today's agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Item number 1, a discussion regarding the I-395 MacArthur Causeway has been deferred to a future meeting and will not be discussed today. And item number 19, regarding potential amendments to the LDRs and the comprehensive plan for allowable uses and development regulations within the 40th Street single-family overlay, has been deferred to the October 10th meeting. Additionally, item number 11, regarding retaining wall setbacks and requirements in single-family districts, has been withdrawn by the item sponsor. Item number 11.
11 and 15.
And item number 15, which is a review and, if necessary, amend parking requirements applicable to districts where live local projects are permitted, has also been withdrawn by the sponsor and will not be heard today.
With that, with the changes on the agenda set on the record by the planning director, with the deferral of item number 1 and 19 and the withdrawal of items number 11 and 15, is there a motion to set the agenda?
Motion.
It's been seconded by the chair by acclamation. The item the agenda is set. I'm going to follow the agenda as printed. We're going to take items 3 and 4 together because they both relate to Lincoln Road, and we'll start with item number 2. If you could introduce the item, Mr. Director, and then I'll recognize Commissioner Dominguez to present on her item.
Sure. This is an item pertaining to residential use incentives for LDR and comprehensive plan amendments.
Thank you. Commissioner Dominguez, this is your item.
Thank you. This item was heard at the last commission meeting. I'll actually let Tom tee up the details.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Dominguez. As Commissioner Dominguez mentioned, this particular item, which has already been transmitted by the Planning Board with a favorable recommendation, was approved at first reading on July 24th, 2024. And the proposal includes both amendments to the land development regulations as well as amendments to the comprehensive plan. And it creates incentive areas for non-transient residential uses. And these 3 areas include the Mid-Beach RM2, RM3 areas, which is roughly from around 40th Street to approximately 63rd Street along Collins Avenue, as well as the West Avenue Bayfront overlay area, and then the South Beach RPS4 district. And the RPS4 district are the oceanfront properties that go from South Point Drive to 5th Street. Within these areas, there are very modest increases in both height and FAR proposed. In the incentive areas for the RM2 district, the maximum FAR would be increased from 2 to 2.3. And within the RM3 areas, depending on lot size, it would go from 2.25 to 2.6, and from 2.75 to 3.2, and from 3.0 to 3.5. And then lastly, within the RPS 4 district, the maximum FAR would be increased from 2.0 to 2.25. Within the Bayfront overlay, which is applicable to properties in the RM1 and RM2 districts, in the RM2 districts, the maximum increase would go from 2.0 to 2.5, and in the RM1 districts, it would go from 1.25 to 1.6. Within the West Avenue Bayfront overlay area, however, the eligible properties are limited to those existing properties that consist of non-conforming or legal conforming transient use. And if they agree to voluntarily convert that to a non-transient use, they could avail themselves of that higher FAR. When this particular ordinance was approved at first reading, because second reading was set for October 30th, in line with our zoning cycles that have been adopted for 2024, the City Commission re-referred the item to the Land Use Committee for additional discussion prior to second reading on October 30th. The administration is supportive of this ordinance, and we would recommend that the Land Use Committee provide a favorable recommendation to the City Commission for second reading on October 30th.
Commissioner Dominguez.
Thank you. So the intent of this item is to incentivize short-term rentals, hotels, to convert from transient use to more residential housing. And I spent a lot of time with the planning department on this, and it has gone to the planning board. They were supportive of it. I'm very grateful that two of my colleagues, David Suarez and Commissioner Joseph Magazine, were also co-sponsors to this item. And I'd like to see it move forward and allow my colleagues to say anything that they would like to on this.
Is that a motion on the item?
Yes?
And I'll second it. Commissioner Suarez, you're recognized.
I think it's a great idea, and I'm in favor.
And I'll just put on the record that over the past 2 decades, we've seen a loss of, I think, 7,600 residents in our city, which has been a trend that we've progressively been seeing. And with this very good policy that you've put in place, Commissioner Dominguez, hopefully it makes its way to the City Commission. We could see, Mr. Planning Director, correct me if I'm wrong, up to potentially maybe up to 180 units approximately coming out of this that otherwise would be transient units, but we now are providing inventory to restore that full-time population that we've been losing in our community.
That's correct.
Very good job, Commissioner Dominguez. It's been moved by Commissioner Dominguez, second by the chair. Any further questions? Commissioner Bott?
I'm going to be supportive of this also, but I do have a couple of questions. So, Mr. Planning Director, if you could, is there any way, there's one project that's in the works, and I was having conversation with the developer, and they were saying, well, we got this bonus FAR, but to avail ourselves of it, we have to go up higher. So how do we manage that with this revision?
The proposed ordinance, in addition to the FAR increase, includes a corresponding height increase to accommodate that
Okay.
additional FAR. So if somebody would like to avail themselves of this with a height increase, we don't see any issues with somebody being able to avail themselves of it.
So the old thing that we've heard as residents so often of, yeah, we're going to do it, and then halfway through the development process, we're like, oops, sorry, we did the math wrong, we need more from the city. This should head that off the pass.
We believe so, yes.
Okay, and then the other thing is that affordable, new non-transient housing is always welcome, for sure, but is this, I didn't see anything in here about making it housing for the missing middle versus making it housing for the top 1% or whatever.
This particular legislation, because the increases are so modest, does not include a provision for mandating a certain sector of housing. So somebody could do potentially attainable housing, but it would also enable people to do luxury housing if that's what they desired.
Okay.
And I have an item, Commissioner Bond, on the agenda for the September 11th City Commission meeting, which is a referral to this committee to discuss more overarching policies that we could adopt to address specifically that middle market, that missing middle that might not qualify for example, workforce housing programs. and can't afford luxury inventory that we have so much of, and how do we incentivize that housing for the middle market that's forgotten of? Thank you for your comments. Are there members of the public wishing to speak on this item? If you're on Zoom, feel free to raise your hand in Zoom. If you're in person, please feel free to come to the podium. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Commissioner Daniel Serraldo with Miami Design Preservation League. I haven't really looked in depth at the ordinance because it hasn't really crossed our table yet. But just in looking at some of the heights, it looks like possibly going up to 150 feet instead of 50. Is that correct? And if that's the case, are we going to have any massing studies before we approve this kind of large increase in heights on Lincoln Road? Because I thought that was part of the planning.
This is item number 3.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, item number 2. Item number 2.
Well, it says 3 on the TV.
Yes, no, I think
Okay.
on the screen they have placed the wrong item. There we go.
Okay,
Item number
I'll
2.
wait for that.
Yes, yes. So this item relates to in Mid Beach to the RM3 zoning district on the West Avenue overlay, Mid Beach RM2, and the RPS 4 area south of 5th. I see Mitch Novick has his hand raised on Zoom. Welcome, Mitch. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Mitch Novick. I would argue, and I've always argued, that the exodus from our city has to do with 3 things. Diminished public safety, diminished quality of life, but moreover, our $1 billion plus budget has made Miami Beach unaffordable to the middle and those that includes our service industry. I'm perturbed by FAR increases decided by the commission. I've always stated I believe these increases, like vacations of the hour, should be decided by the electorate. But I am in favor of incentivizing residential housing, especially along Washington Avenue, where we've approved hotel use, and the 2 hotels have become problematic to residents within the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. Any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none, I will close the public opportunity to be heard. Seeing no further comments from the dais, can we show this item adopted by acclamation? Thank you, colleagues. This item is adopted. Let's go ahead and call upon items number 3 and 4, and I'm going to take them together just because they both relate to Lincoln Road. They're very similar items with similar purposes. So with that, Mr. Planning Director, we could introduce the items.
Sure, I'll go ahead and read both into the record, Mr. Chair. Item number 3 is LDR amendment to incentivize residential uses along Lincoln Road. And item number 4 is to discuss a proposal to revitalize the 200 to 300 blocks of Lincoln Road between Washington Avenue and Collins Avenue, including pedestrianization of the corridor, other streetscape improvements, and amendments to the land development regulations.
Thank you, Mr. Planning Director, and I want to commend Commissioner Suarez for working on this, and I'm proud to have my own item on this. Commissioner Suarez is tackling the west side of Lincoln Road. I'm long been tackling the east side of Lincoln Road, and grateful to Commissioners Magazine as well for working on this. You know, we have an economy to sustain on Lincoln Road, and we also have the economy of our residents who are being pushed out of our city due to the lack of inventory that can serve them. And that's the goal here. The goal here is to create housing opportunities for those who are being pushed out to Brickell, to downtown, to other parts of Miami-Dade County, because they can no longer find that attainable housing that once existed in Miami Beach, and they're at a loss. And our businesses suffer by consequence because there's not that full-time residency to support the ecosystem of our economy, especially when like in the summer, when we don't have high amounts of tourists in our city. I'll recognize my colleague, Commissioner Suarez, to present this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, look, not to belabor what you mentioned, we do have a affordable housing issue in Miami Beach, and a lot of our residents are getting priced out of the market. And what a better location to have a pedestrian ecosystem of residential use than Lincoln Road. You have Trader Joe's on the west side, you have the beach on the other. It's the perfect ecosystem for a revitalization of Lincoln Road. And you have mixed use businesses on the bottom. And so the intent here is to really give, in the next couple decades, life to Lincoln Road that's not just transitory or cyclical in nature. It should be booming all the time. And then let me pass it over to Tom to give out some of the finer details of what we worked out.
And before I start, Mr. Chair, do you want me to go ahead and briefly explain both the ordinances for item 3 and item
Sure.
4, because they're separate?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Sure, it all relates to Lincoln Road. So item number 4 on the east end of Lincoln Road is a little bit more encompassing because it also involves the pedestrianization and that future vision for the east end of Lincoln Road, but let's take them together, please.
Okay. As you may note, what we did was we created 2 separate ordinances, one that's specific to what we would call the east side of Lincoln Road, which is the area between Drexel Avenue and Collins Avenue. And the reason that we use Drexel Avenue as a demarcation point was because that's part of a previously designated city center area that already had a slightly higher FAR and slightly higher height. Also, it includes the Washington Avenue corridor, which is part of a separate residential use incentive ordinance that is currently pending before the planning board. As noted in the ordinance, and we provided a summary of this in the memo, for the area between Drexel and Collins, we created 2 separate areas. And this is specific to item number 4. I'm going east to west. But within the area that is located in the area, what we would call Lincoln Road, and I'm getting to that. Yeah, the first area would be the Lincoln Road North between Drexel Avenue and Collins Avenue. So that would be for properties that are located north of Lincoln Road, the properties with a property boundary on the north side of Lincoln Road all the way up to 17th Street. There would be certain development incentives that a property could avail themselves of if they are willing to have non-transient residential uses. And that could either be converting existing transient residential uses to non-transient or new construction of non-transient residential. Additionally, any non-conforming entertainment establishment would need to be abandoned if it exists within that property. If someone is willing to agree by covenant to proceed with that, north of Lincoln Road, the maximum FAR would be increased from the current 2.75 to 3.5. Additionally, there would be minimum setback requirements of 50 feet from Lincoln Road for all portions of a building above 50 feet in height, as well as a minimum setback of 20 feet from any adjacent, or 25 feet from any adjacent side street. There would be a removal of minimum parking requirements, but a parking is provided.
And I'm sorry, Tom, let me just back up. It's 50 feet setback from the frontage on Lincoln Road, and it's 20 feet setback from a side street.
Correct, 25 feet from the side street.
25.
Additionally, there would be a removal of the minimum parking requirements, but if parking is provided, it would not be able to exceed 20% of the number of off-street parking required under parking tier number 1. A maximum building height of up to 120 feet would be permitted within this area, provided that the project includes at least one of 4 identified public benefits. And this could either be a covered transit shelter, providing a micro-mobility station, contributing to the South Beach Public Benefits Fund, or an expedited building permit, obtaining a full building permit within 24 months of adoption of the ordinance. Additionally, the mobility fee for the project could be waived up until September of 2030, and the FAR and height additions and incentives would only be applicable to projects that obtained a full building permit by September 1 of 2030. For the area that is, we've characterized as Lincoln Road South, and that would be for properties with the lot line on the south side of Lincoln Road, the maximum FAR could also go up to a maximum of 3.5, and
From which baseline right now?
of 2.75, from 2.75 to 3.5. You would, it would be subject to the same provisions as are required for Lincoln Lane North. And if additional building height is sought, one of the public benefits that's required for Lincoln Road North would also be required here. But since this is on the south side of Lincoln Road, and within that larger context of buildings to the south of Lincoln Road, we're suggesting that the maximum height could go up to 150 feet. But again, with the minimum setback requirements that would be required on the north side of Lincoln Road, which would be for those portions of a building above 50 feet in height, a minimum setback of 50 feet from Lincoln Road, and a minimum setback of 25 feet from any side street. And then the same provisions regarding the mobility fees and the time frame to obtain a building permit would also be required.
Under the current code, what is the current height limit in these areas?
Within the city center area, which is the area between Drexel Avenue and Collins Avenue, on the north side of Lincoln Road, the maximum height is 75 feet, but on the south side of Lincoln Road, it's 100 feet.
Thank you.
And then, as it pertains to item number 3 regarding the area of Lincoln Road, east or west of Drexel Avenue, between Drexel Avenue and Alton Road, we've created 3 separate areas. The first we've called Area 1, which is located between 17th Street and Lincoln Lane North. In this particular area, the same requirements for non-transient residential uses, or the conversion from transient to non-transient residential uses, would be applicable. And if a property owner is willing to develop non-transient residential uses in perpetuity and to abandon any non-conforming entertainment uses, the maximum FAR within this area could be increased from 2.25 to 3.0 if the lot is less than 45,000 square feet, and from 2.75 to 3.5 if the lot is greater than 45,000 square feet. Additionally, the maximum building height could be increased up to 150 feet for all lots within this area. Currently, lots fronting 17th Street have a maximum building height of 80 feet, and lots having, and all the other lots in this area have a maximum building height of 75 feet. This increase in height within this area would be subject to no off-street parking being provided, minimum requirements for a micro-mobility station, as well as exceeding the minimum micro-mobility requirements and participating in a public micro-mobility network. Area 2 would be the properties with a lot line on Lincoln Road on the north side, between Lincoln Road and Lincoln Lane North. And in this particular area, the maximum FAR could be increased from the current 2.5 to 3.0. And the maximum height could be increased from the current 50 feet maximum to 100 feet if these requirements and incentives pertaining to parking and micromobility are met. Additionally, within this area of Lincoln Road North, there would be a minimum setback of 50 feet for all portions of a building above 50 feet in height from Lincoln Road, as well as 25 feet from any adjacent side street. And then finally, a multi-story rooftop addition would be permitted above a contributing building. Currently, if you have a contributing building, the code only permits a one-story rooftop addition. And what we've seen happen in the past is people will demolish rear portions of a contributing building so that they could build a separate detached addition that could go higher. This would allow them to actually keep the contributing building, but go higher if it meets the minimum setback requirements.
And then, I'm sorry, Tom, on the other side, on 17th Street to Lincoln Lane North, what was the existing height limit?
If you have a lot fronting on 17th Street, the maximum height is 80 feet, and within the rest of the area, the maximum height is 75 feet.
Okay, and the proposed?
Would be up to 150 feet.
150. Okay, all right.
Then the last area, which is Area 3,
Tom,
is,
you mentioned that there already are buildings around that same height. Maybe you can explain a little bit more.
yeah, there's, the reason that we had suggested going up to a higher height within this area is that this area is not part of an historic district. It contains a lot of surface parking lots, as well as a lot of existing office buildings on both Michigan Avenue and Meridian Avenue. And this particular area, given the size of the parcels within the area and the fact that it's not in an historic district, we believe that with an FAR of up to 3.5, a maximum building height of 150 feet would be more commensurate for that FAR and would be consistent with that established scale, character, and context that exists currently.
And that's in Area 1. That's the area between 17th Street and Lincoln Lane North.
That's correct. And then finally, Area 3, which is Lincoln Road South. These would be properties with a lot line on the south side of Lincoln Road. And the maximum FAR proposed to be increased would be to go from 2.5 to 2.75, and an increase in the maximum building height from 50 feet to 75 feet under the same provisions. The reason we had suggested a lower number on the south side of Lincoln Road is because of its proximity to the more low-scale Flamingo Park Historic District to the immediate south, which is zoned RM1. And so we believe that it would be more appropriate to have a slightly lesser FAR and height increase. However, there still would be an incentive for people to do non-transient residential within that area. As it pertains to item number 4, which is the area between Drexel Avenue and Alton Road, that was a dual referral to both the Land Use Committee and the Planning Board. And then item 3, which is basically the 200 to 300 blocks, if the Land Use Committee recommends in favor of this, that would need to go back to the commission for a separate referral to the Planning Board.
Tom, let me just ask you, because one of the important things that my colleagues and I think this entire committee has been very focused on is, as we were mentioning earlier, that forgotten middle of market individual, that person that can't nowhere near afford luxury, and that person that doesn't qualify for the workforce programs that government so often talks about and focuses on. And there is a big segment of population. They're probably the grand majority of our population that's out there that depend on that. Tell me how these items ensure affordability, ensure that these don't become luxury units in a market where perhaps we have an oversupply of luxury units that aren't helping the hardworking residents of the city.
We've included some provisions in these draft ordinances that we believe will speak to that. The first being the removal of the parking requirement, and in some cases, the actual prohibition of providing off-street parking spaces. Typically, the higher-end luxury units or model want to have off-street parking or multiple off-street parking spaces within their building. The other thing that we did was we put a cap on the size of the units. They cannot exceed 1,200 square feet. Again, luxury units are typically much larger. Third, there's requirements for micromobility elements that would help facilitate the ability to utilize alternative forms of transit than a vehicle. And then lastly, which is a little bit more difficult to quantify with an ordinance, but areas like this are tighter urban areas that we believe would be more appealing to urban dwellers and those who are within what we call the missing middle. And these are the types of areas that are more likely, we believe, to attract people seeking attainable housing because of the fact that it promotes living with more of a walkability emphasis. These are not units with waterfront views or luxury amenities, but it is living that is more urban and lifestyle and more set up for people that like to walk and use micromobility.
And one of the things that stands out to me, especially in item number 3, that my colleague has sponsored, is the fact that in the draft language it specifically spells out that no unit shall exceed that 1,200 square feet unit size, which specifically, helps maintain that size, that form of unit that is still, affordable. I don't want to use affordable because that's overused, but attainable to people that can't afford luxury and don't qualify for other types of assistance. Commissioner Suarez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for touching up on that issue and clarifying that. Yeah, my intention is not to build super luxury housing on Lincoln Road. When I first got to the beach, the first condo. Well, when I got to the beach, I actually rented a lot, and I rented it everywhere from like West Avenue to Deco Plage to you can name it. But the first place that I bought was new construction. It was on 5th and Meridian, and it was a garden unit, no parking, 550 square feet, and it was cheap. It was like, at the time it was like 180,000. It was something that you can actually purchase a new starter home, and that's non-existent today, unfortunately. And I want to, in the next 10, 20 years, I want to give more opportunities to individuals who do want to have that starting home where it's not super luxurious, but it's luxurious in the sense to them that they get to go downstairs on Lincoln Road, they can go shopping, they can go to Trader Joe's, they can walk over to the beach, and they can all do that on a pedestrian way. I mean, how cool would it be to actually live on Lincoln Road and just live your lifestyle there? And you go to the beach on the weekends, and the best part is if we're incentivizing micromobility. So inside these new developments, the way I envision it would be having like deco bike stations or scooter stations inside the building that they ride share, and that can get you anywhere on the beach. And to a much greater extent, this is for people that don't live in Miami Beach but already work in Miami Beach. Because if you poll all the people on 41st Street or the MacArthur, and they're going west at 5 o'clock, and you ask, hey, why are you leaving? We can't afford to live here. This is the development for those people that want to live here but already work here. And I think this is a great start. This is something that, our children are going to take full advantage of. Because, let's be honest. I mean, we're going to put a cap on, I believe, 5 years for this. But even then, through permitting and construction, it's probably a decade before we see some, a full impact scale of this. And so that's, we're thinking ahead. We're thinking for the next generation of Miami Beach residents. And I'm hopeful that my colleagues are supportive of a vision that's primarily residential for Miami Beach.
And let me ask you this, and I want to direct this question to our city attorney. When we create items like this that are incentive-based, and that have a sunset provision. This FAR doesn't become a matter of right. In essence, if they don't take advantage of this to provide the housing that we're trying to attain for our community, by the sunset date, they don't keep this FAR. We're not adding FAR to these properties. They have to earn, the properties have to earn the FAR by providing the type of housing we need for our community. Is that correct, Mr. Attorney?
That's correct.
So to that extent, we wouldn't have a Bert Harris potential exposure as we may with other types of FAR matters where you give FAR, but then you can't take it away because it's a taking of property. Is that correct?
Anyone could always bring a claim, but I think that if the bonus expires, you know, on its own terms, if the ordinance expired on its own terms, then no, I don't think anyone could bring a claim on that basis.
Perfect. Thank you. Colleagues, are there questions, comments? And just for the record, I was asked to repeat this announcement. If there's anyone here for an item having to do with the Lakeview neighborhood, unfortunately, there was misinformation provided to the public. There's no item on today's land use agenda pertaining to the Lakeview neighborhood. And so I apologize for any member of the public that's here expecting for any such item. There's no item on today's agenda having to do with the Lakeview neighborhood. Yes. Yes, I had done it earlier before the meeting started, but thank you. Commissioner Dominguez, you're recognized.
Thank you. I really like the vision for this project. I think it's important to revitalize that area of Lincoln Road, and I think it will do a lot of good. Bless you. And
That wasn't me.
but I do have some questions. I know that the city had recommended and supported not having any parking. My biggest concern would be having a commercial loading zone. If there's any staff that works at the property, whether it be the sanitation workers or front desk that's going to take deliveries from Amazon or whatever the case may be, that there is parking for those people. If the janitor, the electrician, the plumber needs to come, that they have parking on site to be able to fix what needs to get done in those units.
Yes, Commissioner, we did address that in both ordinances. We have a requirement for off-street parking for building staff and/or service operations shall be provided at the same ratio as required loading spaces.
Fantastic.
Wonderful. Commissioner Bott.
So I love the idea of this. I think at various times we've talked about doing something similar along West Ave, along Washington, which would lend itself very well to an increased height in exchange for more residential missing middle housing. So in principle, I'm in favor of this. What I'm starting to get concerned about, and including my own things that I've proposed as well. You know, I come from cities where you have retail on the ground floor, and then you've got 2, 3, 4, sometimes higher residential units above. It makes for a pretty rich and robust community fabric. It's a live, work, play kind of environment. It's great. I think it could help Lincoln Road. I know you guys are working very hard to revitalize Lincoln Road, but the one thing I still hear from residents about what a lot of us miss about Lincoln Road is the smaller stores, not the giant national operators. And if you have people living there full-time, they might help support those and find a path forward. But the one thing that I'm concerned about is that, you know, I'm stepping back, thinking about how all of these very many zoning changes that we are collectively putting forth as a body for different neighborhoods around the city, North Beach, South Beach, West Ave, Washington, Lincoln Road. I have not seen, and I don't know if you guys have done in the planning department, any schematics of what it will do to what our city will look like and how it will feel, and what the traffic issues may or may not be holistically. And we're talking, and it's exciting to be a part of a commission that has such a unified view of how do we get more people who are the missing middle living here again and rebuilding the heart of our city. But at the same time, how does that work holistically? So if we do a project here and a project there, or a zoning change here, or a zoning change there, I want to see how it all works together. I want to see, because we're talking about some not insignificant height increases here, right? It's not going from 2 stories or 3 stories to 5 or 6 in some cases. It could be a lot more, and it might be okay. I'm not saying it's not going to be okay, but I would like us, before we codify things into law, to have, I don't know if it's a workshop or a charrette or whatever, to look at all the things that we have already passed or in the process of passing, laid out schematically, so we can see what we're doing, because it's going to be a lot harder to undo it than it is to do it. Again, we are super unified in our vision of what we're trying to accomplish here, but I don't want to let the fact that we are excited about the opportunity to effectuate change for the greater good, not in our haste that we don't take a step back to just make sure we're not completely changing the fabric of our city in ways that we might not be able to, or that we might not be able to undo if necessary, or not undo, but modify.
And so let me ask this of the planning director, because so we have items 3 and 4, which seek to address Lincoln Road. My item specifically on the east end of Lincoln Road, those 200 and 300 blocks of Lincoln Road that have been very challenging. In fact, you look at the crime statistics, you get to the 300 block of Lincoln Road, crime spikes when you get the official data from the Miami Beach Police Department. So there's a duty on us to address that in ways beyond policing. And it's, by re-envisioning this area and how do we create community and the right type of community that creates a safe environment. But so we have item number 4, which is the east end of Lincoln Road. We have item number 3, which is the west end of Lincoln Road. Separately, we have Washington Avenue. And clearly, we need to see a transformation, especially when we look at some of these nuisance establishments that we have there, places, and I'll put it out there. I know the city attorney will probably cringe, but, Vendome and Exchange and others, that, you have people massacred outside of these places. So again, we have a responsibility to use the tools that we have beyond policing, beyond code enforcement, to reimagine these areas. So we have now Washington Avenue as well. We just discussed Commissioner Dominguez's item, which is very modest in its scope. Which others do we have that are commission policies that are being driven forward?
Those are the 4 that are pending now. There is
2 coming up.
there is an item there are some referrals on next Wednesday's commission agenda. One for the CPS 2 area at Lenox and 6th Street. And I think that's the only FAR increase per se, unless I'm missing one from next September. But those 4 that you had alluded to, Mr. Chair, I think are the 4 main ones.
Okay. I, in theory, don't disagree with you that we need to look at these together. How do they all come together? What does our Public Works Department say about capacity? Not capacity in our infrastructure independent on, Washington Avenue. Well, our infrastructure might be able to support the Washington Avenue policy, but is it able to support, is the infrastructure able to support the impact of the Washington Avenue policy together with the Lincoln Road policy? Do we have the right public transportation, plans in place? I'm gonna propose and I know we're going in a very good direction here. And I sense support from our colleagues here, but I do think it is prudent, it is responsible for us to consider that to consider the infrastructure impacts that any of this has and make sure that we're properly planning. Would we be inclined to perhaps have a special meeting where we look at these policies together? Washington, the West Avenue, the CPS items that we just passed, the oceanfront items that we're looking at, and these together, so we can analyze them together. I know I want to know with some of these other items, how are we making sure that forgotten middle is being addressed? I want to make sure that when we're giving FAR, that it's not just we're giving FAR to create housing. Well, I want a specific type of housing. I want to make sure that it's not just housing that cater to the billionaires and the uber rich people. I want to make sure it's housing that, you know, putting aside the infrastructure thing, that we're creating the housing that the people that work at the schools, the people that work in this building at City Hall, that, you know, young attorneys that are having to go and move to the mainland because they can't afford the type of housing that they want here in Miami Beach because the housing has gotten so expensive, that we really are yielding that. And so I don't mind to bring all of these policies together and have that holistic analysis, lay it all out on a map, seeing where we want to encourage that development. We can have the conversation together with the Live Better policy that I want to develop, that I have on the agenda, that we're referring to this committee, so we can have that holistic discussion. I'm open to that.
If I might, oh, sorry, Jeff.
Yeah.
Agree with the, thank you, agree with the overall sentiment, and thank you for letting me chime in, even though I'm not a sitting member of the committee.
You're a member of the city commission, and all members are always welcome.
I appreciate that. I did put together just a couple of slides to help convey kind of the vision, if you wouldn't mind just going through those real quick. And it's really all the comments that you and the rest of my colleagues have been saying about residential housing are just absolutely spot on. It's been my vision for years and years, and probably the primary catalyst about why I got involved with our city. But also I want to emphasize from an economic viability standpoint, you know, where we see our struggling commercial corridors, but also, Mr. Chair, what you point out, the public safety benefit. We cannot keep fighting public safety by just increasing police. We need to look at the urban environment and what type of policies, especially in urban planning, that we're putting forward that facilitates this type of environment, that sees such inadequacies in our public safety. And when we look at retail corridor like Lincoln Road, it truly is an outlier when we have just a commercial corridor. And if we could just, I'll take 30 seconds to just run through these slides about some of the preeminent retail corridors throughout the world. And it's exactly the type of vision that we're looking at here. Don't laugh, because I put these all together myself, and I'll stick to the numbers guy. I'm not a arts guy, as you'll soon see. But kind of mixed use planning. Yes, I actually really like that. Sometimes I can be more effective without words. And this just kind of details what some of the benefits of mixed use urban planning are. I'm not going to talk about these because I think we've hit some of these points. But the walkability, it's actually taking cars off of the roads. The economic viability, there's no better way. I'm sorry, PJ, I thought I'd be able to do it. Yeah, the next slide. The walkability, this is going to take cars off the roads, whether for residents or for the workers as well. The economic viability, right? We're no longer the only game in town, so less people are coming in from across the bridge. They're staying in their own local areas like the Design District, like Brickell, Wynwood, Merrick Park, the Miracle Mile. So we need to rely on what's here. And it's a great way to help promote Lincoln Road is by bringing our customer base right on top of Lincoln Road, and community building. In our summer travel, in my summer travels, I was fortunate enough to be over in Europe. It was so great to be in these plazas, right, where there's a sense of community. You're not just going there for a specific purpose to go to Sephora. Yes, I have a 7-year-old girl, so I'll use that, or Lululemon. You're actually going there to have a sense of community. And I'm just going to highlight, PJ, if we could just kind of flip through the slides. This is over in Paris, right? This is their main retail shopping corridor. They don't have vacancies there. Why? They have not only tourists, but they have building customer bases. And PJ, we'll just, kind of flip through each of these. This is in Rome by the Spanish Steps, their preeminent shopping district, Via del Corso. This is over in Barcelona, Paseo de Gracia. There wasn't a single retail vacancy that I saw, and the sense of community that they had in those areas. And this is local here in the US. This is Coral Gables, what we all think of being one of the most restrictive areas anywhere, right? The biggest NIMBYs in the world. They have adopted the mixed use development for, putting out some Twitter lingo, right? For their retail corridors, Rodeo Drive, Beverly Hills. This is Wilshire Boulevard in Wynwood. And the other examples here are countless. The derelict mall in South Miami, that's being revitalized by the same architect that worked on our Ocean Drive vision. So really, this is just keeping up with the times and coming into a policy that we should have had for a long time, but I'm so proud of our commission for at least having the vision to move forward there. So, Mr. Chair, thank you for allocating me that time. Couldn't be more supportive of this vision.
So, again, I think we're all aligned with this vision, and it's really just a question of making sure we're doing it holistically. And I would suggest it's not just a meeting where we're looking at documents with numbers, but it's, diagrams and vision boards and not vision boards like I'm putting out into the universe, but showing what it could look like. And it's really and the infrastructure for sure, the sewer lines and public works, but it's also, we've got all these streets that go this way, and maybe we need to reimagine how the streets actually work and start thinking about making a bunch of one-way streets to keep the flow of traffic and really look, we have a chance for the next year and a half at least to really make enormous change in the city for the greater good. And why would we deprive ourselves the opportunity to do it in a really grand way in terms of true planning, true urban planning, which your department, I know I talk to your staff all the time, especially when we were on the planning board, about wouldn't it be great if? Well, we have an opportunity now in a number of sections in the city where the commission is extremely aligned to make significant change. So let's make it holistically. Let's make it work. Let's talk about the streetscape. Let's talk about how streets are going to be used. Let's talk about how the traffic is going to flow. We hear about the plans that are coming from North Bay Village, and we also hear that nobody's thought about how that water is going to affect us here in Miami Beach, or how the flow of traffic is going to affect us in Miami Beach. So we can't control what they do over there, but we can definitely control it here. So let's do it. Let's take an extra month or 6 weeks or whatever it's going to take. The next commission meeting isn't until the end of October, so this is a great time for us to really dive into it. And sometime between now and then, have a workshop and, whatever the mechanics of that are, to really dive into it.
And more specifically, I think the policies that we have are good, and I support these policies. But I do want to see how do they come all in together.
That's exactly right.
And some of the other policies, I just want to make sure how do they truly, not just today, but into the future, to continue to support that middle market individual that needs housing. What stabilization requirements we put into, we work into incentives. Could we put into incentives to make sure that individuals of certain income limits are able to continue affording to live in Miami Beach. Commissioner Suarez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just speaking of workshops, we have a workshop on Washington Avenue coming up, I think, is it today or tomorrow?
Next Tuesday.
Yeah, next Tuesday. So that's already part of the process, right? We are going to put legislation out. I'm not trying to rush this at all, but what my fear is if we try to put everything together, you have something that sort of loses its vision for each kind of neighborhood. So like Washington Avenue is very different than Lincoln Road, and Lincoln Road is very different than West Avenue, which is very different than Fifth Street. But I think we both have the vision of primarily residential, less cars on the road. And I think that as our guiding compass is what really is going to move forward. I'm not particularly a fan of trying to bunch it together and wait, a year and a half to get some meaningful legislation out. I'm fully supportive of between now and planning board meeting, which is going to be, I'm not sure when for this particular item, when the earliest would be, and then between two readings, and having a 6/7 vote on this, that throughout that process, everything's going to be fleshed out. And if we need to get Public Works to determine if we can handle, the capacity, certainly I don't want to build without knowing if we can or cannot. But, I think the residents of Miami Beach want to see some change. We want to see some affordability in housing. We want to see less traffic. And I think, and not to mention, but we see vacant storefronts on Lincoln Road. We see storefronts on Washington Avenue that we don't necessarily, there's too much of them. We want to push the needle forward and in the right direction. But I think it's all part of the process. This is, we're on a committee right now. I didn't put this on the agenda. This is, it's going through a strenuous process, especially when even the planning board, for example, only can hear these types of items 4 times a year, right? So we have to wait for those specific times to do it. So I don't see a particular need to delay, considering that this is like a 6-month process anyways, if you think about it.
If I may, and I'll tell you, as a sponsor of one of the items and a big supporter of some of the other items, I do see a value between this meeting and the next land use meeting for us to have just a special meeting, put these all together, have staff do an analysis for us, that we see how these all do come together. I don't think it'll be a delay. I think we can do it. We've had meetings in the past, and I've made commitments that I would never delay items here in committee, and we've gotten through some pretty controversial stuff that we've been able to push forward. So if I'd be very willing to make sure that there's not a delay associated with this, because I want to see my own legislation move forward, get passed without any great delay. But I do think in the interest, I'll tell you why it's most important. In the interest of public trust, it's very important. And that's something that's very important to me. For a long time, floor area ratio, FAR, had been a very contentious issue in our city. And I think we need to show to the public that we truly are being very measured, that we are being truly as thoughtful as we can as we put these items forward. And we have been, and you have been, we all have been very, very thoughtful. And we all have done tremendous amounts of works behind the scenes in putting these items forward. But I think for the public, it's important to have the public discussion on how they all do come together, on how our infrastructure can handle this, on, for example, on what plans, from my perspective, does the police have? When you increase population, you also need to increase police resources. How are they going to be planning for that? Just, a general conversation about what is the ultimate outcome when you put all of this together. And my commitment would be having that conversation, a special meeting between before the next land use meeting, so that we truly do not cause a delay on this policy or any of them. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Tom, if you can maybe you can enlighten us on the time frame. where are we with this, with the planning board having LDR amendments being heard, and if we delayed it to the next land use meeting, what does that do?
So for LDR amendments that include an increase in floor area ratio, there's a requirement for 2 planning board hearings. And in between those 2 planning board hearings, there's a requirement for a public workshop. So for instance, the Land Use Committee endorsed the Washington Avenue residential use incentives at your June meeting. And we were able to get that on the July Planning Board meeting as the first meeting. The public workshop for that item is scheduled for next Tuesday, and we anticipate that item going to the Planning Board for its second transmittal meeting on September 24th. These ordinances would follow the same track. It's basically as soon as we can get them to the Planning Board, and in order for us to calendar it on the Planning Board, we have to do an impact analysis where we work closely with Public Works, with our Transportation and Mobility Department, to do an analysis of the area in terms of the expected impact. We've done that for Washington Avenue, and the same would be required for these areas of Lincoln Road.
Right, so as you, colleagues, as you can see, it certainly seems like we already have a robust way of looking at these LDRs.
We don't, the planning board does.
Right, but Tom, you said that the planning board and staff has to look at infrastructure, sanitation, sewer, transportation. They take that into account with the planning board, or does that come before the commission meeting, or both?
So after the planning board reviews that impact analysis, they will then transmit the ordinance with all that data to the city commission. And as you're aware, it requires 2 hearings before the city commission, as well as a second community workshop meeting in between first reading and second reading. All that analysis is provided to the city commission as well.
And just to get this right, so we need to have 2 readings on the planning board, 2 workshops, and 2 commission meetings, and we need a 6/7 vote.
Correct.
Yeah, so,
And because of that is why I'm suggesting, is we're gonna be putting our staff and the planning board through that entire process, that we make sure that, that the public truly is very well aware and sees our vetting of this before we give this its final vote here at land use. Tom, let me ask you this. Voting on this today as opposed to next month, so that we can in between have a special meeting of the committee to discuss these together. It won't delay this by a year, just pushes back that process by a month.
Correct.
So it's not that we're gonna lose the cycle. Is that correct?
That's correct. The cycle, keep in mind, for FAR increases is twice a year. And so second reading will always line up on either October or April. And so unless the commission wants to waive the cycle and allow the ordinance to be adopted earlier, there is going to be a longer cycle for FAR increases.
But we don't miss the cycle by having this come to us in next month.
No.
Tanya.
With all due respect, I'm not talking about what is being discussed. We are a 7-mile island of sand in the middle of the ocean. What happens in one neighborhood impacts another neighborhood. We're a mile apart from all these neighborhoods. I'm not suggesting that we homogenize all the different programs. I'm talking about, let us take a minute, not delay anything by a year or 6 years or 6 months, but have 1 month, and we don't even necessarily need to delay anything, but in between all these 8 million checkpoints, which are great because they're certainly different from the way it used to be, one of the things that we do is take all of the things that we're agreeing on and plot them out on our map and say, you know what, this is how it's going to look. This is what we are doing to our city in the quest of serving our residents best. I'm not talking about delaying, and I'm not talking about the sewer lines for a development on 2 blocks of Washington. I'm talking about how the city is going to hang together. Because once this goes, we can't roll it back. But in the process, over the next, whatever it is, 4-6 months that it goes through all of our checkpoints, we can give ourselves the luxury of a meeting and staff resources. I get it. It's not like it's just going to appear. You guys are going to have to, your team is going to have to make this happen. But to see how it looks, like, do we really want 10-story buildings on Lincoln Road? Let's see what it looks like. You know what? Maybe it looks great and we think it's wonderful. Maybe we decide it's really better if it's between 5 and 7. And that's fine. But let's have that conversation before we are so far down the road that we can't tweak it.
So, well, and Commissioner Bond, I think this is where, right here is where we have that discussion.
But I'm talking about having something
Well,
with
wait,
visuals.
I have the floor. This is where we have the discussion as to the zoning policy. But I agree with you on, as it relates to the other impacts, which is why at one point there was so much concern in our city that FAR became this horrible taboo, when in fact it is a great tool that, when used responsibly, can help people that are being priced out of our city, whose livelihoods are being affected, and we could restore the human fabric of this city that we have lost. So when used responsibly, that FAR can be great. But the zoning policy, this is the body where we discuss that zoning policy. But as it relates to having some sort of special meeting between now and our next land use meeting, I'm very much in favor of that, to consider the other impacts that are not necessarily the zoning policies, but the impacts on the rest of the community. So I'm willing to do that. If we have concerns about the zoning policy, this here today is the venue to discuss, okay, this ordinance, I'm concerned with this ordinance because it might be imposing on a historic district, it might be imposing on the character of areas that perhaps is more characteristic with low rise. I might be concerned with, sight lines. If those type of concerns, this is the venue today to raise that. But I don't want to, give you a false expectation that if we have a special meeting, that in that special meeting is where we're going to be discussing setbacks and that type of stuff. This land use committee is the opportunity to discuss those parts of the policy. Yes.
This is the committee that has those discussions and makes recommendations. If, after we have this workshop or whatever we're going to call it, and we look at things holistically and we say, you know what, we have more opportunity to build up a little taller here, and we think in retrospect it might be a little smarter to make it a little lower there. When it goes to the commission with our recommendation, we can make a recommendation with an amendment. Like, we're not signing anything in blood right now. And I'm not saying I support this. I've said this 100 times. I support this. But I want us to get it right and not let just, stuff get created because we didn't take the extra step during the process without prolonging the process to see how it hangs together. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Bott, for really your thoughtfulness, and you were very sensitive to wholesale changes, and I understand that, and so am I. So let me just get a couple of clarifications. So Tom, if we do a special land use meeting between now and the next official land use meeting, it's not going to delay anything?
It might push the planning board hearing a month, because if, for instance, the land use committee recommended in favor of the area from Drexel to Alton today, we could probably get that to planning board in October. September might be a stretch. Depending on when the special meeting is, we still might be able to get it to the planning board in October.
Okay. So look, if we want to have a special land use meeting to discuss specifically Lincoln Road, okay, and I guess vet it a little bit more, I'm okay with that. I think it would be a little unfair to bring in Washington Avenue separately, because that's already sort of in the process. Yeah, I mean, certainly we can discuss it at the meeting, but I certainly don't want to.
It's not bringing back the policy, it's just seeing it, okay. It wouldn't be necessarily how I envision it is Washington Avenue is already in a process. We can't bring that back from the process. What I would imagine, what I see is, given that that's already in the process, and now we have other legislative items that we're bringing forward, it's just seeing how does it, okay, we've already got that in the process. We have these that are coming forward. It's not bringing it back to reconsider it or change it. It's just seeing.
Let's visualize it.
Visualize it all together. Seeing, how much housing does it yield? What does that mean in terms? For example, we know for sure, even by trying to encourage people to take public transportation, and even by encouraging people to use micromobility and telling them no parking, we still know people are going to have cars because we deal with this in other parts of the city, including the historic district, where buildings don't have parking. The city needs to think, okay, we're going to have to make allocations to provide for parking. The city will. And so just, that type of, making sure that the left hand is talking to the right hand so that the zoning policies that we are creating translate to the right type of parking policies, public works policies, police policies, to make sure that we are growing in the right way.
If I may.
Yeah, and then guys, let's wrap this up because we have other items on the agenda. And Commissioner Suarez, you want to move having the special meeting, and we can have staff work on setting a date, and then we can bring this back to the October meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll second that. And then just to close before I open up the floor to the public, quickly, please.
So to me, it is including all of the areas that we're talking about because we need to talk about, where the bus routes go. And, there are holistic things we need to talk about. So it's not to relitigate the policy. It's how does it work together as our city? And that's what the point of the meeting is. And I think I've beaten this poor horse to death.
Thank you. If there are members of the public wishing to speak on the item, please approach the podium. If you're in person, if you're in Zoom, please raise your hand. And before we go to the public, let me recognize Commissioner Dominguez.
I just had a quick question. So if we have a special commission meeting in September, a special land use meeting in September, can it go to the October commission meeting?
Yes, your item on the residential use incentive is on the October 30th meeting. And if it's discussed as part of this special meeting, we absolutely can still take it to the commission October 30th.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, with that, I'm going to open up the public opportunity to be heard. Daniel, you have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Daniel Serraldo with Miami Design Preservation League. So this is a very important initiative, and so we're all happy the commission is taking this on. But I do want to say that in 30 plus years of urban planning that the city's done, they've always had master planners come and make what's called a vision. And thank you for Commissioner Bott for bringing that up, because this whole city is a vision. It's built on visual visions of what we want to make. And so me personally, reading the zoning, I don't understand it. I need to go home, maybe go somewhere quiet and understand it, because there's no visual at all in there unless I miss something. So I'm really hopeful that you do heed to the suggestion that we design the vision, that we look at Lincoln Road, what is the maximum height that will be compatible for the historic district and also adjacent to Flamingo Park neighborhood, because without that, I just can't see this would be the largest upzoning, and now without a voter referendum. So we've got to convince us and the neighborhoods around these areas that it's the right thing to do. So I would ask that you engage in some massing diagrams for the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And Tom, would it be possible to get some massing visuals at that meeting?
Yeah, we've actually put together some massing visuals for the Washington Avenue proposal that we've shown to the planning board, and we'll make those part of the package, and we can do the same thing for Lincoln Road when it comes back to you.
Thank you. With that, Wayne Roberts on Zoom, welcome. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Alex. I got The first question is that there was statements that the developers would proffer that the residential units could not be converted into short-term rentals or monthly rentals. But can the commissions in the future change that ruling and make it on a 4/7 vote?
Tom,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Wayne, and I'm just gonna pause the timer, because I believe this is on a covenant, that becomes a legal document that's registered with the courts and runs with the land. Is that correct, Mr. Attorney?
That's correct.
And so would a future commission be able to change a covenant, that's registered with the courts?
The commission would need to amend the code to do that and would also need to release the covenant.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
on a-
Right, so 4/7 in the
It would
future
take 5
could
votes
change
to amend
that
the code
law.
and, right.
It would take
Okay,
5 votes. It would take 5
So,
votes.
so the proper really is, it's disingenuous to me. But additionally, 150 feet on Lincoln Road, you don't need a visual to see that in your head. We're not Miami. I don't want to be Miami. This city, the residents of the city, has basically voted down every FAR ruling or referendum that was proffered by the commissions of the past. I understand the brick and mortar commercial way of life of America has changed dramatically over the last 20 years with Amazon and big box stores. I fully understand that. And we have to do something to make those investors and landowners successful, as well as the city. I don't think 150 feet makes any sense whatsoever on Lincoln Road. You're talking 15 stories, wholesale. There's got to be some moderation, and a visual will certainly make it evident to anybody in this room that would change the dynamics of Miami Beach in a truly negative way. And that's what I have to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. And just for clarity, I believe that on item number 3, that 150 feet applies for the areas north of on the areas from 17th Street up to Lincoln Lane North, where currently you'll see, like, for example, on Meridian Avenue, Mr. Planning Director, there currently are buildings that are close to pretty close to that height. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, but then on the other parts, for example, it goes nowhere near 150 feet. And the other parts, it goes to 100 feet. In other areas, to 75 feet. So that's on a smaller area where it would go up to 150 feet, and it's because it's in context to the height that's existing there today.
Correct.
Not on paper, but on the built height that currently exists.
Correct.
Thank you. Peter, welcome.
Peter Canavas, 1 Lincoln Road, Ritz-Carlton. I just want to say that this is probably the most positive and uplifting city meeting that I've ever attended. I really appreciate the sentiments I've heard today, particularly the efforts of Commissioners Fernandez and Suarez. I just want to quickly clarify my role here. I've just been trying to provide practical information to the city and this committee to help revitalize particularly the 200, 300 blocks, but in a meaningful way that actually works. Neither my company nor any of my partners have any economic interest in the 200 and the 300 block, but the people, this is really all about people. I think Morris Lapidus said everything he did was all about people, and I think all of us really believe that. So the people that support our community, the residents and the tourists alike, they judge the quality of life at a neighborhood level. They don't look at building envelopes the way that developers do. So anything we do really must be about rebuilding neighborhoods. That really has to be our goal, and I think that's the sentiment that I've been hearing here today, thankfully. The pattern that I've been seeing on East Lincoln Road, for a number of years now is kind of a devolution to almost what it used to be when my brother and I first came here and put the Ritz-Carlton in, and it was a very rough neighborhood at that time. I see that cyclical pattern happening again. And you know, a couple of years ago, I had the good fortune to find a visionary commissioner, Mr. Fernandez, and we shared the common understanding that a public-private partnership was a good way to leverage limited city funds to achieve district-wide results. And in absence of a master plan, impactful district plans can get us to some of our desired goals quicker, and that's sort of what I've been trying to you know, work with the cooperation of the city and Commissioner Fernandez. So I know that we have produced some suggested legislation, and I know staff has also, as Tom clarified today, come up with their own visions. And I think that this is really a process. I've heard both Commissioners Suarez and Bott speak today, and I think each of them is a little bit right. This is a process. And if we're going to get this right, the devil is in the details. Yes, we do need to do massing studies, but not just for the city. Developers need to do them too, because at the end of the day, for this to work, they have to back in to something that's economically feasible. So they're going to have to do their own studies. I just want to say that this is going to be my last development. This is my personal swan song. I'm off to other things. As the owner of One Lincoln Road, I really feel an obligation to add to the legacy of the people who labored before me to maintain Lincoln Road and keep it what it is.
Peter.
I would like to, yeah.
I gave you an extra minute. So if you could wrap up your statements.
I'm done. I just do have one other request. I have a very brief video that I would like to show you. I think it's under 2 minutes. I think it speaks to a number of comments I've heard from Commissioner Bott and some of the other commissioners. I think it may be helpful if you would allow me to show that.
Mr. Director, have you reviewed the video?
Is this the video that you had forwarded to us? And I think it's specific to the 200 and 300 blocks.
So
correct?
let me do something. There's other members of the public that are still on Zoom. Let me finish with them. And out of a courtesy to you, because you have been so hands-on with your time, sharing your vision, I'll grant you the time after I'm done with the other members of the public.
Fine, thank you.
Thank you. Mark Needle, you have your hand raised. Welcome. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Hi, I have not had a chance to read any of this. I'm just listening, and there's some things about it that that are appealing to the approach. The idea that we're talking about proximity to public transit, eliminating the parking to reduce the massing. The unit size, I think I heard there was a max of 1,200. The average should be lower so that it matches the naturally affordable mix that works in a neighborhood like Flamingo, where I live. I would just say, anytime you're talking now about increasing FAR, I really agree with the sentiment that you need to make sure the public understands. I could go from supportive of this to very uneasy about this, depending on whether the plan, how much height is involved in this. How much is there appropriate stepping away from historic areas? I would just say this: don't go for a home run when you can build a rally with a single and then another single and so forth. If people have the sense that this is an overwhelming tide of things that may be well-intentioned but not fully thought through, it'll make people like me very uneasy, and it'll make other people probably, even less supportive. Whereas going slowly and going for the small wins and making it very understandable that these are incremental changes that have leverage larger policy, living changes for the shift is important. One other thing I do think you need to address through the code, a way to, if a property is built with a bonus that is 6/7 vote, I think it should not be withdrawn with less than a 6/7 vote. The code should address that and make it very difficult to circumvent.
Thank you, Mark. And Mr. Attorney, let's work on legislation regarding the amendment to a covenant that's proffered. Specifically, as we were discussing, if someone voluntarily proffers a covenant to not have short-term rentals in their property, and that's part of an FAR incentives that's granted through a 6/7 vote of the City Commission, it only stands to reason to me that a reversal of that would then allow transient or short-term should at a minimum also require a 6/7 vote of any future City Commission. And so I'd like to work on legislation on that.
We can look at that as part of all of these ordinances that are moving forward.
And
Nick,
would you like to join me?
Co-sponsor that.
Yeah, well, wouldn't that be part of the original?
Yeah, we can include that as part of each item.
Yeah, so,
Right.
okay, so Washington Avenue.
We can
Lincoln Road.
incorporate
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, perfect. But as a standing policy in general, I think we should have that standing policy for any future, or even past. For example, we have, in the CPS districts in South of Fifth, we have incentives, FAR incentives that were actually approved by the voters. We have a number of FAR incentives to do away with transient and short-term that were actually approved by the voters. A 4th, 7th vote of a future commission shouldn't be able to do away with that covenant that the voters, indirectly approved. And so I just want to make sure that aside from what we bake into these pieces of legislation, we have standing legislation that would apply, that to amend future covenants to do away with short-term rental prohibitions, that it required that 6/7 vote. Thank you, Mr. Attorney. Any other members of the public wishing to speak? Annabelle?
Good
Welcome.
afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I just want to say that on behalf of the
Your
bid,
name for the record, please.
Annabelle Yopis.
Yes. Welcome.
On behalf of the bid, I think, we are feeling very positive and we welcome this opportunity to reimagine the road and what it could be. But I also don't want it to stop the train from moving forward because I think we're at a point where it's a critical need now to really design what Lincoln Road could be in the future. And we know how long things could take sometimes. So while I do understand having a visual, I do understanding what it can be. I think a lot of these FARs are not going to be front facing on Lincoln Road. There is going to be a setback. I think it's been very prudent and thought out process of the height. We're feeling very positive. This is something that can move forward and it will be very positive for the road. We need year-round residents. And this will afford the opportunity for Lincoln Road to have that. And I think the businesses will see the success of having that. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Annabelle, and thank you to all the members of the Lincoln Road bid and the staff for the great work that you're doing trying to keep the energy alive on Lincoln Road. Thank you for being here. Mr. Larkin, welcome. You have 2 minutes to speak.
So good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, board member, staff, Michael Larkin, 200 South Biscayne Boulevard, here today representing the Ritz-Carlton Ownership Group with Peter Canavos. Staff has done a great job in drafting this legislation. I just have one minor change I'd like you all to consider. And it's absolutely exciting that you all have recognized this shrinking city phenomenon and the debilitating effect it's having upon our city in terms of so many different things. The one thing I want you all to consider are the setbacks. What I've done, I've highlighted our language in red, and the setbacks as Tom has drafted it, it's after you get to 50 feet in height, then the tower portion has to set back 50 feet from Lincoln Road and then 25 feet from the side streets. I think that's a bit much, it's too much, and what I'm recommending in response to that is that give the Historic Preservation Board the sole discretion to say, okay, if it's not going to be 50 feet, then it can be reduced to 20 feet. And then balconies can also encroach into this 20-foot area by 10 feet because everyone nowadays wants an expansive living area with their balconies. I think when you, with the depth of these lots is not so great. These are not oceanfront lots, which has an incredible depth to them. these are lots, and as you go up and down Lincoln Road, the depth of these lots shifts. You know, as you go farther west, they don't get as deep. From the 200, 300 block, they're somewhat deeper on the south side because there's a private drive there. But I'm asking you all to consider getting some flexibility within here because I'm concerned, and I don't have the benefit of a massing study yet. This is just my gut instinct telling you all that I think a 50-foot setback on lots that are not so deep is oppressive, and it might harm the redevelopment effort.
Thank you, Mr. Larkin. Without a massing study, I can't agree to this amendment, to at least to my piece of legislation. And just to educate myself and the public, Mr. Planning Director, right now, I guess the requirement is there has to be a line of sight study to understand the impact of having setbacks and not having setbacks, and to determine what the setbacks would be. Is that correct?
Yes, the line of sight's taken from across the roadway, and it's a line drawn from approximately 6 feet high at a diagonal to the lowest point of the building, and then it continues.
And our draft policy did away with that, and it said, okay, we'll do a standard 50 feet, because in fact, even the line of sight study could have required a greater setback.
Correct.
And so as it is, we are providing already an incentive. So let's look at the massing. Let's see what the massing tells us. And as part of the review, because we're going to have this massing at our special meeting, and hopefully we can, consider this, vet this to determine objectively with visuals what the true impact of the setbacks would be. Are there any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item on Zoom? You can raise your hand, or in person to come to the podium. Seeing none, I'm going to close the public opportunity to be heard as a courtesy to a great stakeholder, Peter, who has been a great wealth of information and wisdom in urban planning, and sharing his vision. I'm going to allow for staff to show the video that's been sent to the planning.
Securing the future of Miami Beach. We all know the problems of crime and drugs. The city has been losing population for many decades. Shrinking cities create long-term problems. Vibrant cities need vibrant populations. Vibrant populations need vibrant amenities in safe spaces. But where in a built-up city can we create these spaces? The Washington Avenue and Lincoln Road corridors have the potential for re-urbanization. So how do we do it? Through Urbanism 101. By density, by mixed uses, and by an architectural regulating plan. Successful cities have a pattern of decreasing densities radiating out from a mixed-use urban core. But Miami Beach's city center is the reverse of this pattern. It's neither dense nor has mixed uses. To change this condition, we must correct two historical elements. From its inception, Lincoln Road segregated commercial and residential uses. Bankruptcy and the Depression halted Carl Fisher's use of taller buildings, causing the risk-averse developers of that era to put up lower-profile structures. The lost synergies of this land use pattern created a vulnerable and perpetual roller coaster economy for Lincoln Road and the city center that causes economic underperformance even to this day. Our task is clear. We need to create more residential, combine it with retail and commercial, and clean up our streets to eliminate crime and drugs. We need new land use and zoning guidelines. This effort requires certain principles. Property owners and government must cooperate closely to meet the objectives of each. Regulations must incentivize owners to reinvest in new uses. Incentives must encourage rapid action by owners to alter their properties. And the regulation should employ visual elements to help ensure architectural integrity. Together, we can turn this into this.
Thank you. So there was a motion on the table that I seconded to have a special meeting of the Land Use Committee. Staff will work on scheduling that meeting, and we'll bring this item back to the October meeting of the Land Use Committee. And at that committee meeting, it is my expectation for there to be a vote on these items. Okay, with that, we can continue to item number 5. Staff is going to work on that because what is there a date that would anyone like to propose a date? September 19th. Commissioner Dominguez is proposing September 19th. Is that going to provide staff enough time to prepare information, massing studies, and the type of information we would need?
Yeah, I think that it might be a tight print deadline, but I think that we could have everything prepared by the 19th. What's that?
What do you mean a tight deadline for print?
When I say a tight deadline to print, we probably wouldn't be printing it until like a few days before as opposed to a week before.
I would say, let's say, because I also do believe, whatever you prepare is only proper for the public to get it, be able to read it. If we're going to have a public discussion, the 26th could work on my calendar in the morning. I don't know if the 26th can work with.
I'm going to be out of town. I have a marine conference
On the 26th? Okay.
25 and 26.
How about on the
27th.
The 27th? Could the 27th work?
That's also the 27th. It's from the 25th to the 27th.
The
24th also works.
Before the senior ball?
September 24th, Tuesday? That works for me.
Okay. We could accommodate on the 24th.
There's a planning board meeting the 24th, but that meeting should be over by late afternoon if you wanted to have the meeting like around 3 or 4.
Okay. That works for me. And Tommy, you're sure you'll be able to put together the comprehensive information
Yes.
we'll need by that date. And you all do a great job in preparing actually some great zoning analysis for the planning board. And I would say that's the level of analysis that would be great to have for this meeting.
Okay.
We often don't get that level of information at the city commission level because we're not the local planning agency. But I would say on something as substantive and important as this, it'll be great to get that level of information. All right. So with that, we'll have a special meeting of the Land Use Committee on September 24th, and the item will be heard for a vote at the October meeting.
Okay.
With that, Mr. Director, let's introduce item number 5.
Okay. Item number 5 is amend the land development regulations to allow for administrative review and approval of understory areas and to review the current maximum building height requirements for single-family homes to promote resiliency and reduce flood risk.
Commissioner Suarez, this is your item. I want to recognize you to speak on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as we have seen over the last, I think, couple of months where we've had some serious rain events where we've had probably hundreds of millions of dollars in home in damages from 100-year storms that were back-to-back in a matter of days, that Miami Beach is very susceptible to climate change. And we're at a critical point now where we have a situation where weather patterns are very unpredictable. And one thing is for sure, Miami Beach is flooding more and more. And one of the issues for single-family homes is flooding, especially on Alton Road, as we have all seen. And so I did a little research, and I wanted to see how we can ease the burden of property owners to raise or to mitigate this sort of damage from flooding. And it turns out that there is a particular way to build a house where you have an understory, very similar to the single-family homes in the Keys, where it's like on stilts. However, the understory doesn't visually appear to be on stilts. It uniformly designs for the rest of the house. And if you are a homeowner and you want to build a single-family home without having to go through a cumbersome process with the DRB, what you can do is you can build a mound or like a hill.
That's a mountain.
Yeah, and you could sort of bypass the DRB approval. If you want to build an understory, which really has a lot more value, visually speaking, and aesthetically, and an actual value, because those homes are more valued financially, you have to go through a DRB approval. And not to mention that when we encourage homes to be built on these large mounds for flood elevation, any sort of nearby home that doesn't plan on demolishing and building up, they're more susceptible to flooding because water will dissipate to the next door neighbor. There's more water to displace. And so with an understory, on the other hand, it's meant to flood. So if there is a catastrophic event, or there is a major rain event, and there is flooding on the first floor, it's designed to be flooded. For example, it's a storage, it's a garage, it's where you could put a ping pong table, if you will. It has many uses. It's not considered living area. And so, one of the things that I've consistently heard, and everyone has heard, is the building process is very cumbersome to get a building permit. This is one of those blockades of getting a building permit. Most people do not want to go in front of a DRB because you have to hire typically a lawyer to help you through the process. And typically, it's going to take more than one review on the DRB. And so, staff recommended this, I believe, last year. And it was
the resiliency code.
Yes. And it was a very tight decision. Given the fact that we've had all these rain events in the last 6 months, they're just going to get worse. And I certainly do not want to encumber our residents on resiliency. I think we should make sure that whatever incentives we have to upgrade the infrastructure of their homes, and whatever we can do for them, let's not put any roadblocks in front of them. So I welcome the feedback of my colleagues.
Thank you. Commissioner Dominguez, you're recognized.
Thank you. When I started, the resiliency code was just being rolled out, and it was actually my item for it to go to DRB, and it was at the recommendation of speaking with several staff members. So it's interesting that now, a year and change later, we're trying to take away the DRB process from it. I certainly don't want to encumber residents, but it was put in place for a reason, and I'd like to hear from Tom Mooney to see what's changed in the year.
So just as a point of clarification, when we brought the resiliency code and the LDR updates to the commission in 2023, there was already a requirement in place for DRB review of understory homes. What we had recommended is that be removed and that they be able to be approved administratively. The commission disagreed with us and left the DRB review in. So we had recommended that the DRB, mandatory DRB review be removed, but the commission disagreed and left the mandatory DRB review.
Your mic is not on. Yeah.
What are the implications to take away the DRB review?
So if DRB, mandatory DRB review was removed, any applications that sought waivers or variances would still have to go to the DRB because it wouldn't allow those. But what would happen is people who are proposing an understory home that did not seek variances or waivers that are basically built in accordance with the code, they would no longer be required to go before the design review board. The understory homes could be reviewed administratively.
So let me just speak on this. Single family? This is my observation on it, independent of staff's position, implementation-wise. The homes that have the understory, I believe, I personally find them to be less visually and aesthetically impacting, at least adversely, in single-family neighborhoods, especially in single-family neighborhoods where we're trying to preserve historic homes. What I've witnessed is that when you don't have the understory, and then they need to build a BFE, so they create the mountain and the retaining wall, that has a greater impact on the aesthetics and on the surrounding homes than the homes that have the understory. And it almost forces the surrounding homes to be demolished and raised to be at that same elevation. And so if any needs to go to DRB, in my opinion, it should be those homes that don't have the understory because of the impact that they're going to have to the adjacent properties. And so because of that, from the implementation of understories, the impact that understories have on abutting properties, I have not seen a negative impact. In fact, I have homes around me, neighboring me, that have understories, and quite frankly, I think it's beautiful. I think it's great, and it does serve an important resiliency purpose. And you can still have an older home, an older low-scale home next to it that's not visually impacted by the retaining wall, by this monstrosity of a mound. And what I would do, Commissioner, is not only support what you're proposing, I think the opposite should also be done. If you're not going to do the understory and you're going to do the mound because of the greater impacts you are having on the surrounding homes, then that does have to go to the DRB for review.
Mr. Chair, I totally forgot. I have a presentation, if I can put it forward. It's
Sure,
a couple
of course.
slides. PJ, if you could put it up, please. Okay, just so that everyone gets sort of like a visual on understories. If you go to the next slide, please. This is the goal: approve understories administratively based on resiliency code recommended by the administration. The understory is a superior type of home. Understories offer better catastrophic storm surge protection, better rain event flooding protection, and more usable space. Hills, mounds send water downhill to flood the neighbors. Understories currently require DRB approval. We need less red tape for building permits, not more. Next slide, please. A couple more things: prevent water from reaching the interior of the home during floods, provide elevation without requiring significant topographical changes like grading, building on an artificial mound, allow for the home to be blended into the existing landscape, can be more cost effective than constructing a hill or mound, and provide insurance discounts. And so that's important because, as we all know, insurance is going up significantly, and providing this is certainly a benefit to insurance costs. Next please. consistent of non-habitable spaces like a parking garage or storage. It can be vented to allow floodwaters to flow through without creating structural pressure. And believe it or not, there is structural pressure when you have a mound, believe it or not, which is what I've learned. Allow water to flow naturally beneath the structure, helps prevent water from pooling around the foundation, reducing the chance of erosion. So this is another thing. So if you notice some of these homes with mounds on it, after a rainstorm, it's sort of just, there's rain puddles just sitting everywhere in front and on the sides.
And they're not supposed to, because they're supposed to be able to retain the water on property, but in implementation, the water does flow, and they're not able to truly, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Planning Director, I mean, when you have that mound, you're supposed to have a certain level of water retention to avoid that overflow flooding to the surrounding neighbors.
Correct.
And PJ, if you go to the next slide, I don't want to belabor it. I want to go over some visuals. So, these are some visuals of the homes, and you can see the understory. You can go to the next slide. I think it gives a better view. And go to the next slide. This is more representative of an understory. Again, it's very similar to the Keys. And as everyone knows, whenever there's like a hurricane that goes by the Keys, they're required and they're actually mandated to be built with an understory. Next slide, please. This is an actual home that was built and has an understory in Miami Beach. Next slide, please. Another rendering. And as you can see, it's even the landscaping sort of blends in, okay, and it's more visually appealing, especially from
the ground level.
Exactly. Next slide. Just another one, and I think that was the last one in PJ. Yeah. So you can cancel the slideshow.
I want to recognize Commissioner Dominguez, but first let me just ask a quick question. The home height. Is there a difference in the home height when there's an understory as opposed to there not being an understory?
Understories are allowed to have 3 additional feet of height for purposes.
3 feet.
Yeah, 3 feet.
So that's not even, that's like, and how much is one floor?
One floor is typically anywhere from 12 to 14 feet.
Okay, so 3 feet. So it's not that an understory can have an extra floor of height. They're able to have 3 feet.
Yeah, and predominantly so that the understory area is livable. Or usable, I should say.
And those homes that don't have an understory, that are new, when they create that mountain, they would generally then be more or less the same height. They would be allowed to build the same height except for those 3 feet.
Correct, and in some instances, they might build to close to the same height because height is measured from base flood elevation plus up to a maximum freeboard of 5 feet. So if somebody does a mountain that is at BFE plus 3, BFE plus 4, the 2-story height is being measured from there.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Dominguez.
When something's administrative review, then that means that the neighbors don't have a hearing. They don't know anything about it, like what happened with you in Meridian with the Airbnb. It was administrative review, so you had no idea that it was there.
That was a change of use. That was.
But it was administrative review is my point, as opposed to
But what we
having a
ended up
public hearing.
doing was, what we ended up doing when there were administrative reviews, we required a notice of the administrative review as a result of what happened in South of Fifth. In this case, if there were to be an administrative review of the understory, what would be the notice requirements to the neighbors, to Commissioner Dominguez's point?
In historic districts, we have a couple of different notice requirements. One is a posting. So if something is not required to go to the Historic Preservation Board, the property is posted. That same requirement does not apply to areas outside of historic districts. So in single-family districts, when somebody makes an application for a new home, if they're not required to go before a land use board, there's no minimum notice requirement.
So maybe we could, would it be possible to, and to your point, Commissioner Dominguez, because I agree with you, residents do deserve a certain level of notice. Could it be incorporated into the ordinance for there to be a notice posted of the administrative review in the event the public wants to provide a comment?
Yeah, as long as it doesn't stop
It could be incorporated, but since there won't be a board hearing, you know, any comments from the neighbor would have to be sent to staff.
Yeah, well, but it also provides the public the opportunity to be able to request staff, for example, for a rendering, and they want to know, okay, what's going next to my home, and that type of stuff.
Right.
So, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Look,
if you would agree. to the
Sure,
Commissioner's orders.
if we want to provide neighbors with notice,
That's always important.
That's totally fine with me. It's, again, I'm not trying to make the situation between neighbors difficult. I'm simply saying that, you know, this is a staff recommendation that was passed up at the last commission. The last commission, in my opinion, got a lot of things wrong. I think we're here to fix it. The building department process is broken. And these little wins are something that we can do to really make it easy to build in Miami Beach. Not only make it easy, but build a better home and a more resilient home. So a home that can last the next 100 years. And so I'm okay with letting the residents know.
A posting requirement.
Sure.
So with that, would you move the item? And I'll second it.
With the chair?
Yeah, Commissioner Bond, and then I want to open up to the public, and so we can then move on to the next item. But by the way, great item.
I'll second it, yes.
Okay, so Commissioner Bond.
So I, again, appreciate the idea to make this more streamlined and to make it easier for people. When I was on the planning board, Chair Fernandez, I don't remember if you were still on the planning board with me or if you had already become commissioner, but there was an item or a couple of items, I don't remember, where we were presented with the opportunity to take the vetting process out of the board's hands and give it to the administration as an administrative review. And the planning board soundly, unanimously rejected that because the benefit of having a board review a project means that there are more eyes on a project and issues that might not have been recognized or, you know, opportunities to improve the project get discussed and incorporated. And, you know, if there's a way to do something between an administrative review, even with a notice, because I think nobody is going to understand how that works, and sending in your comments does not allow for a robust discussion to try to find the best solution. So I don't feel like that's sufficient, but I do understand the desire to make this a more streamlined process. I don't know what that solution is, but I'm not comfortable with it.
The one thing I would say, Commissioner, is that these are not projects; these are people's homes, and we want them to be more resilient, and that's, and I know you agree with it, and I get completely where you're coming from. The thing is that right now, I believe the policy discourages people from taking the resilient approach, and so they're still building that home, or if we want to call it a project. But what they're doing is that they're doing something that is much more visually impactful, which is the mountain, which then puts a concrete wall on their neighbor, that the neighbor has to see that concrete wall up to the property line or with a small setback from the property line. And that doesn't have the review from the DRB. And so to me, it's, you know, especially when we're trying to preserve historic homes, what will push out a historic home more? Having a home with an understory and at the same elevation, ground elevation, but with an understory, or having a home that now is at a much higher elevation with a concrete wall with spillover water onto the property. That's going to cause more displacement. And so I appreciate where you're coming from. And you know, I don't share the same opinion. I think in this case, the policy is hurting. And if anything, what we should be doing is actually sending the homes that don't have the understory to the DRB. I'm going to open up the floor for the public who wishes to speak. If you're on Zoom, you can raise your hand. Daniel, you have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Commissioner Daniel Serraldo. So you know, this is an issue of a right to know, and I know this commission is very pro-resident right to know. What I will tell you as someone who grew up in a single-family neighborhood is there's nothing worse than all of a sudden one day a bulldozer coming next door to where you live, and you as a resident having no idea what is coming up. I mean, we've had people with cancer that have been, you know, impacted medically by this. So, you know, I think we'll try to digest this idea of like that the mound is a reason. It's not about the mound. The mound should also go to the DRB. I think that's the issue, is that unfortunately because of the state preemption, there was now that mechanism removed for review of the pre-42. And so the commission kept in, well, if there's an understory, because most of the homes are understories, then we would still have that review process. The design review process is very important for residents, not just the homeowners that are building, but also the people that live there. So I would strongly urge that you keep the design review process there, that you equalize it so that the mounds go just like the understories, but you don't remove it, because just like last time, you're gonna have the HOAs come and say, please don't do this. If we were in a community in Naples where every home were exactly the same, like a Shoma community, they would have HOA regulations, but these are public lands, public neighborhoods, even the islands are all public, city-owned. So we need to have this review. It's a very bad idea to remove it, and you're gonna get a lot of complaints from neighbors if you remove it. So I would strongly encourage that you don't. Happy to meet with any of you to discuss why we got to this point. But Design Review Board has been very good for the city, and I think we need to continue that strong resident input. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Mr. Attorney, this is an amendment to the LDRs, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that means before it goes back to the city committee, does this need to be referred to the planning board, or is this a dual referral to the planning board?
This was a dual referral.
So that means before it comes back to the city commission, there'll be a planning board recommendation.
That's correct.
And the board hasn't reviewed it yet.
That's correct.
And so it'll be, you know, I'll value, to Commissioner Bott's point, I'll take into consideration, I'll value whatever their input is on this. I just do think that the policy right now does discourage a more resilient approach that could be less impactful to the neighbors. And there's a motion and a second.
I just want to bring up a good point, because Mr. Seraldo made a point where, you know, one day you see a bulldozer and the next, but, you know, on the flip side of that, you know, if you have a neighbor who just doesn't want to see any sort of change next door, because for whatever reason, and I've heard my share of reasons, because they don't like the neighbor who's coming in or who's buying it, or they just simply don't like the design, by you know, by sort of discouraging development of these single family homes, and for whatever reason you have a neighbor who's just adamant that I don't want to see my neighbor's house torn down. I mean, that's, to me, I think I have an issue with that, especially when it comes to resiliency. You know, right now we're facing catastrophic floods. I mean, we just had 2 100-year storms back to back in a matter of days, and we've had homes on Alton just continuously get flooded. And, you know, we're here complaining about drains getting not being cleaned out, and here we have an opportunity to really make something meaningful and remove the red tape of a building permit process. I mean, you know, it's easy to come up here and talk a big game about, hey, we're gonna do something for the building department, but when the rubber meets the road, and we have an opportunity to speed that up and streamline it, we should take advantage of that.
Thank you, Commissioner Suarez. Commissioner Dominguez, and with that, we're going to move.
Want to make sure, sorry.
Yes, no,
I want
please.
to make sure that I understand the motion. Is it to give notice to the residents?
Notice.
The city administration does the review, and the mounds now require DRB.
Well, can we incorporate the mounds going to DRB as part of this item? If it's fine with the sponsor?
I think we could. Tom, do you agree? I think
Yeah,
it's
I
within the
think
scope.
I'll be
Because,
supportive of.
yeah, because it has not gone to the planning board yet, we could amend the title to include that. But just for clarification purposes,
Fine with that, Commissioner
Yeah,
Smart?
that's for clarification purposes.
yeah, that would mean all homes other than understory homes would have to go to DRB because new homes now have to be located at base flood elevation +1 at a minimum. And typically homeowners want to go a little higher than that. And virtually every new single-family home that's not an understory is on a mound. And so,
Let's keep it separate then.
Let's
bring
keep it
us-
separate so that we can get the information, but I do believe we do need to encourage people to go the more resilient route that is less impactful to their neighbors. I do believe that the understories are much less impactful to the neighbors, living close to several of them, and living close to several mounds as well. And so let's do separate policy on that so that we can really understand that. But if it means that every home that gets built that has an understory that chooses not to do the understory, that every home that gets built that has a mound that chooses not to do the understory has to go to DRB, that's a big incentive. Not having to go, yeah, that's a big incentive in going the resilient route. We want homes to be more resilient. And I'm sorry, I don't want my neighbor one day building a new home on a mound that's going to put water on my yard. That's the biggest offense you could do that the policies could do to neighbors. And so let's keep it separate. But I do want to see a draft policy and draft analysis on what the potential impacts could be in having those mounds go to the DRB. So there's a motion was made by Commissioner Suarez.
You motioned it, I seconded it, or vice versa.
And so with that, I think it's 3-2-1. 3-2-1, we can show the item adopted. With that, Mr. Planning Director, let's introduce item number 6.
okay. Item number 6 is discuss the proposed Sixth Street overlay.
Commissioner Dominguez.
Thank you. So this item was sponsored by Commissioner Minor, and I'm a co-sponsor. I've been working with the Flamingo Park Neighborhood Association on this, and I think that all parties have come together on language, and I'll let Tom tee it up.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Dominguez. When this item was last discussed at the Land Use Committee, the direction given to staff was to incorporate the remaining items where there was a difference of opinion between staff and the Flamingo Park Neighborhood Association. And that included the prohibition of hotels within 200 feet on the south side of Sixth Street, as well as the issue regarding the maximum building height for properties near Sixth Street. We still continue to believe that it would be more prudent to allow up to 50 feet in height regardless of lot size, but we have incorporated the recommendations of the Flamingo Park Neighborhood Association in the draft ordinance in that regard. The only remaining issue pertained to the applicability of properties fronting Lenox Avenue. And the following draft revision to the boundary section of the ordinance has been developed, which we believe addresses both the concerns of the property owner on Lenox and Sixth, as well as the Flamingo Park Neighborhood Association. And this would basically establish the boundaries as properties located from Fifth Street to Sixth Street between the east side of Lenox Avenue and the west side of Washington Avenue within the CPS 2 district, except for those lots with frontage on Lenox Avenue and Washington Avenue as of January 1st, 2022. However, we added the following additional language. In the event a lot with frontage on Lenox Avenue is unified with another lot, such unified sites shall thereafter be subject to the regulations herein. So if the property that is on Lenox and Sixth remains a standalone lot, it would not have any of the regulations applicable to it. However, if it is combined or aggregated with an abutting lot, then at that point, the regulations would become applicable.
Thank you. So I'd like to move the item, and I think there's people here to speak on it.
Commissioner Dominguez, you're moving the item with the language, yeah, with the draft revisions, okay. With that, if there's members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please approach the podium. If you're on Zoom, please raise your hand on Zoom. Scott, welcome.
Thank you. Scott Needleman with the Flamingo Park Neighborhood Association. And as you've heard, this has been going on for quite a while, and we're happy that I think all parties are on board now with the language. And I do want to thank Tom for years of back and forth with us to get this through. So again, thank you, and I'll let the also Michael speak as far as the what was going on with some of the property owners with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Mark Needle on Zoom, welcome. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Hi, I want to be, I got to echo, I want to support the item. I appreciate the efforts of everybody to achieve consensus. This is definitely what we've sought to do all along. We remain open to working with staff at the planning board to consider any improvements to it, but having the Flamingo ordinance as the baseline, I think really is an important step. It took us extra time to do it. We did, come back from planning board in order to start again with the more compatible ordinance, and I think it's easier to adjust it from there at planning board if needed, and it'll come back to commission as well for a final. So thank you for your work, for your efforts all around, and we also expect to have an appropriate compromise on the other remaining pre-approved, previously approved site for with that little small open air restaurant on Jefferson. We will come to an agreement on that in the same spirit at planning board.
Thank you, Mark. Michael, welcome. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Michael Larkin, 200 South Biscayne Boulevard, here representing Russell Galbett. We had the privilege of working with the Flamingo Park residents. Commissioner Suarez threw us together, and it was not bloody at all. Russell behaved himself quite well, and the Flamingo Park residents were always very courteous and kind. As a result, we achieved this compromise, and we're here to support it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. Mitch Novick, welcome. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Good early evening. Again, Mitch Novick. Just want to express my support for this ordinance with some concern related to possible noise intrusion or noise emanating from the small restaurant on the southeast corner at Jefferson and 6th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. Daniel, welcome. You have 2 minutes to
Thank you,
speak.
Daniel Serrato with Miami Design Preservation League, and thank you. This is a process where the community came together, made a plan, and so thank you to the sponsor for doing that. I just want to make sure that there was that last-minute proposal to increase the height on that lot on Lennox, but that's not in this ordinance?
It's a separate item that the Commissioner will bring at the next commission meeting.
Okay, but as long as it's not part of this, I think this is good. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to confirm about the concern having to do with noise. Outdoor noise of music, television is being prohibited, and I believe it's 200 feet from 6th Street. Is that correct, Mr. Planning Director?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. And seating in the restaurants are going to be limited?
That's correct.
Okay, so hopefully with the safeguards that Commissioner Dominguez has wisely put in here with the support of the neighborhood, hopefully those concerns should be abated. Commissioner Bott, you're recognized.
Thank you. It's kind of a thrill to see this come to fruition. It's come before the planning board when I was on the planning board, and so it's kind of full circle to see it be batted around a number of times, go back to the drawing board. People who might be on opposite sides of things come together to find the path forward. So with that, I will very happily second it.
Excellent. And Commissioner Dominguez, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe as part of your ordinance, it's also prohibiting outdoor bars. Is that correct?
Tom, can you expand on that?
Actually, outdoor bars were already prohibited in the CPS district, so.
Okay. All right, great. All right, so there really shouldn't be any concerns with noise. Good job, Commissioner Dominguez. So the item's been moved and seconded. I think by acclamation, we could show that adopted. Excellent work. Thank you. With that, let's move on to item number 7.
Okay, Mr. Chair, item number 7 is discuss creating a registry of planned residential developments in zoning districts where short-term rentals are permitted to ensure properties comply with the city's short-term rental regulations and facilitate code enforcement efforts in the event that any units on the property are rented on a short-term basis.
Commissioner Bond, this is your item. You're recognized.
Yeah, thank you. So as everybody is painfully aware, we are preempted from doing very much of anything about short-term rentals. This is just giving us the opportunity to know where short-term rentals are either already operating or plan to be operating, so we can ensure that if they are, that they are complying with the rules of our city, including BTRs and paying the applicable taxes and fees, et cetera. Because one of the things right now is that a lot don't know they're supposed to, and some of the platforms work with the city to be compliant, and some tell us to take a long walk off a short pier. You know, it helps everybody just know who's doing what, so that we can properly proceed as a city, as communities, and as neighbors. And Tom, you can probably do more justice than that.
No, I think you covered it, and I think just for clarification purposes, Commissioner Bond, what you're talking about is a registry of any residential building that would be eligible to have short-term rentals within a district. Because currently, we do have a requirement that any short-term rental obtain a BTR for every unit. But I think what you're talking about is all the buildings that would be eligible at some point in the future, even if they're currently not doing it.
Well, and we also know that not all short-term rentals are doing what they're supposed to. So
They're not all registering.
Right, so it will help us enforce properly. Even if they're permitted to, they're still supposed to operate as a properly functioning business. And so this will just give us a tool in the toolbox to make sure that everyone's doing what they're supposed to.
With that, is that a motion on your item?
Sure.
I'll second it. Are there members of the public wishing to speak on this item? If you're in person, feel free to come to the podium. If you're on Zoom, raise your hand.
Thank you, Daniel Serraldo with MDPL. I just want to say this is so important, like in Town Center, that we thought we had that master plan and then it ended up being all short-term rentals. So thank you, Commissioner, for bringing this forward. We need to make sure also in our new master plans for Lincoln Road, Washington Avenue, that we don't let happen what happened in Town Center, because that would be another decade lost. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Sara de los Reyes on Zoom, welcome. You have 2 minutes to speak. Sara, you need to unmute
I
yourself.
was on mute. Good afternoon, commissioners. Yes, I do like to see that. That would be really great, even though we, our area, we could have short-term rentals. We probably we'll have one building built for short-term rentals, and I think I would like to see how you guys are going to mitigate that. That would be really, really great. And at least so residents are aware the areas that this could be built or not, or is it coming to the area. That would be really great in advance. Thank you.
Thank you, Sara. With that, I'm going to close the public opportunity to be heard. Tom, anything else to be placed on the record?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, Mr. Chair, that what we'll be doing is moving this item to the City Commission favorably with direction to the administration to develop the registry structure in coordination with the item sponsor.
Thank you. I'll be happy to second your motion, Commissioner Bott, if you move your item.
So moved.
All right, second by the chair, by acclamation. Let's show that item adopted. With that, let's go on to item number 8, Mr. Director.
Okay, item number 8 is discuss a possible ordinance to require property owners to properly dispose of yard trimmings and leaves to avoid the clogging of stormwater drains.
Commissioner Bott, I believe this is your item. You're welcome to introduce your item.
Thank you. And I think Commissioner Suarez had the same idea. So it's basically the notion that right now people do yard work or hire people to do yard work, and they're very happy to sweep things down the drains. And when we have big storms, or they just don't really think about the drains as something that need to be a little bit more protected. And so when we do have these big storms, the drains don't operate as fully as they should because they're already clogged with normal landscaping detritus. And so I would like to, as other cities do already, make it the responsibility of the homeowner to bag up their lawn trimmings and their leaves and branches, and they can either bring them to get composted, or their landscaping company can take them off-site, but they should not be going down our city drains. Other cities do this already, and there are a lot of different ways to attack resiliency. This is one more, and it's not particularly onerous.
Thank you. Is there comments from the dais on this item? I see we have our Public Works Director here. Is there any comments from the administration on this? Commissioner Bott, you have a motion on your item?
I do. I move it.
I'll second.
All right, and by acclamation, we can show that adopted. I'm sorry, are there members of the public wishing to speak on this item? I think Sara de los Reyes has her hand raised, but I think that might be from the last item. I don't know, Sara?
No, I'm sorry. Let me lower it.
Yes. All right, with that, we can show this item adopted. Thank you, Commissioner Bott. With that, let's move on to item number 9. Mr. Director, let's introduce the item.
Okay, item number 9 is expedite the opening of the Baywalk and move the development of the Baywalk up on the GeoBond prioritization list and present the Baywalk plan to the Land Use and Sustainability Committee.
Thank you. Commissioner Dominguez, you've been leading on this item. Please give us an update.
Well, David Gomez and I are becoming BFFs, and we talk so often about the Baywalk, and we did just a few days ago, and if you could give an update to us here on the dais, I'd appreciate it.
Happy to. As part of David Gomez, Interim Division Director with Capital Improvements. As part of a standing item on the commission agenda, we've been coming back monthly to give updates on the Baywalk projects. The developer responsible for the fabrication of the design and construction of the pedestrian bridge has agreed to come regularly and provide their updates. They have made some progress over the last month or two, particularly with regard to permitting with DOT. And they've made some advancements on some of the dewatering permits that are required. And I have the developer here to give you a more specific update.
Sure. Welcome.
Hector Morello with Terra. As far as the pedestrian bridge, we've been advancing with FDOT. FDOT now is at last stages of approvals, routing the approvals. They've accepted all comments or responses to the comments for the pedestrian bridge. We've gotten all Durham approvals for dewatering as well. And we've gotten our DRB and our MOT concurrence letters issued by the City of Miami Beach. So we're kind of in the last stages of being able to start probably at the end of this month. So once we get everything aligned, we can definitely start work, getting out there to start mobilizing our utilities.
Are you behind in any way with your project schedule?
Well, so because of permitting, we are pushing back, but I think we're still going to be at the end of 25 to completion. We're still targeting that.
How delayed are you?
Right now, we're still shooting for the end of 25, is what we've always been projecting.
But on your project schedule, where were you supposed to be now, and where are you at now?
So we were supposed to be starting with utilities in September, early September. So now we're targeting end of September. So we're just going to have to accelerate a little bit of that work to be able to advance on that.
Okay, understood.
If we could bring it back next month and
With
continue
pleasure.
getting updates?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
gentlemen.
David. Thank you, Hector, and Commissioner Dominguez. Thank you for your continued leadership on this item. Let's introduce item number 10, Mr. Director.
Okay, item number 10 is review the future land use map classification for Pride Park.
All right, this is an item I placed on the agenda because under our comprehensive plan, and under the future land use map, Pride Park is currently classified as a public facilities in the Civic and Convention Center district. And what that means is that it provides for development opportunities. It provides for opportunities If the convention center ever wanted to expand, it could expand into Pride Park. If someone one day wanted to build a structure on Pride Park, they could potentially build a structure on Pride Park. And it wouldn't benefit from the same protections that parks have in the charter. By this change to the future land use map classification for Pride Park, we would be changing it to recreational open space within the convention center district, putting it under that recreational open space category under the future land use map would give it the same classification that all of our other important iconic parks have, and granted the same charter protections that all other parks have. And most importantly, it will protect it from there being easily, a ballroom, a garage, an expansion of the convention center ever happening on that site. Mr. Planning Director, is there anything else? Do you need to correct me on anything that I've stated?
No, everything's fine.
Okay. Is there comments from the dais?
I'll move your item.
I'll second it. Any other comments? Commissioner Bott?
I just have a question for clarification.
Yes.
I'm supportive of this, so that's not an issue, but just so I understand, does this change how, we've had a lot of conversations with residents there and with staff about how this park gets used by the convention center. Does this limit further than what we've already limited, the number of days that it can be used?
No, it doesn't limit the number of days, but it does limit how the space could physically be used in the future.
Okay.
You wouldn't be able to have a structure. You wouldn't be
Understood.
able to alienate it easily. It just adds a certain level of other protections into it.
Alienate it, like call it names and make it feel bad.
But Mr. Attorney, correct. I don't know if that's an accurate answer to Commissioner Bott's question about.
That's the right answer. This doesn't address how many days a year it can be programmed.
Are there members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing no members of the public, the item's been moved and seconded. We can show it adopted by acclamation. Perfect. Thank you. With that, item number 11 was withdrawn by the sponsor. Colleagues, let's introduce item number 12.
Okay, item number 12 is review traffic impact study requirements in the land development regulations for new developments and consider whether LDR amendments are appropriate to strengthen the city's review of a project's impact on transportation infrastructure, as well as enhance traffic mitigation measures required of applicants.
Thank you, Commissioner Bott. This is your item. Well, you're welcome to introduce.
Thank you. So what we hear all the time when new projects are being contemplated in front of the planning board or when people come to talk to us is, oh yeah, we've done a traffic study, there's no issue. And they may have, and maybe that's what that traffic study has shown, but I don't feel that those traffic studies go far enough, as we were talking about earlier, how it affects the neighborhood beyond the confines of that particular project parameter, whatever it may be. So whether it's single family home or a redevelopment of a full block, the roads are all interconnected, and as we are seeing firsthand, as things on the mainland and the causeways get impacted, our entire city gets backed up completely and becomes impassable. Again, the major developments happening in North Bay Village, there were no traffic studies, to my knowledge, that talked about how those projects are going to impact people in Miami Beach going to and from work on the mainland. So I wanted to open this up for conversation with the staff about how we can strengthen that, have more stringent requirements, and broaden the scope of what gets looked at, so it's not just literally that square block or that whatever the radius is, so that we can figure these things out holistically.
As you'll probably note in the memo that we prepared, we discussed this with the Transportation Department, and we provided a summary of what the current methodology is for different types of circulation and traffic studies, and they're based largely on the intensity of a project proposed. Obviously, a duplex is not going to have the same level of analysis as a mixed-use office, retail, restaurant building or a destination building. In our experience, both the requirements for a traffic study, including the the method of transportation that's required, as well as the peer review, are very robust. Traffic studies are required not just for applications that submit for a CUP, but any DRB or HPB application that would be considered a threshold project over 5,000 square feet. And the methodologies that are used are very robust to the extent that they could be further enhanced. It would be difficult only because of how thorough they are now. If it is something that you'd like to continue the discussion on, we could either continue the item to the next meeting and then ask transportation staff to participate in the discussion, or we could certainly meet independently with transportation staff to do a deeper dive into exactly what they do so that everybody has a better understanding.
Is there something that can be done to expand the area covered by the traffic study?
The Transportation Department does use a very broad area in terms of current traffic as well as projected traffic from projects that may not be generating traffic impacts yet. And so they'll use both current traffic counts as well as projected traffic counts. To the extent that those should be extended or expanded, we could certainly talk to the Transportation Department about that to see if the current range of the study area needs to be expanded.
Yeah, I just think things have changed. And Jose, welcome back from vacation. It's good to see you. Because now we've got things that were not contemplated when these were written, right? So 395 is a disaster almost all the time. There's going to be work on Alton Road sooner rather than later, even though we've asked them to delay it a little bit. The 79th Street Causeway is going to go under construction, and there's going to be construction on the other side of the 79th Street Causeway. We're hoping to get the bridge a little slightly better than it is now, but that's going to be an incremental improvement. It's not going to be significant. So I understand that it's robust, but it doesn't take into consideration the fact that, once again, we're a 7-mile stretch of sand in the middle of the ocean, and we're all stuck going on and off the island and up and down the island in the same handful of thoroughfares. And maybe we do continue it and we meet independently and then either dispose of it at the next meeting.
I'll second your motion to continue it to the next meeting.
Is that okay with?
Yeah, and then I can coordinate a meeting with Jose so that we can all sit down together and you can get a more thorough understanding of both the land use process as well as the Transportation Department's review process.
Okay, thanks.
So we'll show this continued to the next meeting. Okay.
Thank you. Let's introduce item number 13.
Okay, item number 13 is discuss amending notice requirements in the land development regulations to permit the city to use a publicly accessible website hosted by Miami-Dade County as an alternative means of publishing notices and advertisements for land use board applications, which are currently required to be published in a newspaper of general circulation.
Commissioner Suarez, this is your item. We've discussed similar items in the past, so I anticipate this is probably a quick item.
Yeah, I
second your motion.
I move the motion.
We can show it adopted by acclamation. All right. Great presentation. Thank you. No slides. No slides. All right. Item number 14.
Item number 14 is amend the definition of floor area to exempt unisex gender-neutral restrooms from the definition of floor area.
Thank you. And this is an item that I placed on the agenda, just because it's one of the small things that that we can do for individuals who are transgender or non-binary, and to make them feel safer, make them feel, just something as simple as using a restroom. Shouldn't have to be a controversial issue, and we can achieve that by encouraging people to provide unisex or gender neutral restrooms And so by making unisex and gender-neutral bathrooms exempt from the floor area calculation, we in essence are incentivizing the provision of those restrooms. So yeah, I don't know, I'll second it. There's comments from the dais?
I'll third it.
All right. Are there members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none in person, none in Zoom, we can show this adopted by acclamation. Mr. Director, item number 15.
Item number 15 was withdrawn.
Item number 15 was withdrawn. Let's proceed to item number 16.
Item number 16 is to discussion and consider the potential rezoning of the MXC Mixed-Use Entertainment District in North Beach along Ocean Terrace between 73rd and 75th Street to a different zoning district classification.
North Beach Commissioner Tanya K. Bond, you're recognized.
Ooh, North Beach in the house. So the MXC was designed to incentivize two underdeveloped and sorely needing some TLC areas of the city. One was Ocean Drive and one was Ocean Terrace. I can say that we have I might be able to safely say it, but I can't get the words out. I can say that we have successfully accomplished those goals in both areas. I'm going to leave the Ocean Drive MXC conversation for a later date because it's a heavier lift. But I will tell you that even though Ocean Terrace right now is a bit of a mess, we do have a big, beautiful project coming. The park is going to be open, I hope, by the end of the year. We think, maybe. But it's going to be glorious. And then the hotel and the condo is going to be up there, and we are seeing major changes ready in North Beach. So the intent of the MXC zoning has been accomplished. We do not need to leave that door open for unintended consequences of activities that we don't particularly want there. So I think it is time to remove that zoning and classify it with something more in keeping like CD2 with what's going on.
I love it. I second your
My emotion.
Your motion. I think it really distinguishes the item and it puts it aligned with the future that it has.
Awesome. Thank you.
Is there any comments from the dais? Any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none, we can show the item adopted by acclamation. Wonderful. Good job, Commissioner Bond. Mr. Director, let's introduce item number 17.
Item number 17 is an ordinance to modify the height of allowable fencing and shrubbery of oceanfront properties facing the beach walk to improve sightlines for pedestrians.
Okay, this is Commissioner Bond's item. Commissioner, you're recognized.
So this is very simply trying to make this shared use path safer for everybody who's using it, whether pedestrians or cyclists or rollerbladers or anybody else. There are principles that are guidelines, the CPTED principles to help make things more clearly visible for those trying to engage in law enforcement activities, but it's also just common sense when you pull out of the side. One of the entry points, you want to be able to see around the corner so that you don't get run over by, somebody trying to improve on his mile or somebody zooming by on a bike or a scooter or whatever. So this is just requiring, and it would apply obviously to the city's properties as well, but this is just to set forth standards by which all properties that abut the beach walk on the western side would need to adhere in order to ensure that there's better visibility for those using the entrance points from the regular streets to the beach walk and coming around the corners, coming back off.
Commissioner, I have a few questions on this item. So this would lower the height to what amount?
So I'll let Tom go through the specifics of it, but they're pretty standard guidelines.
Yeah, what we had come up with, based upon the direction of the Land Use Committee at the last meeting, are two separate amendments to the code. One is an amendment to City Code Section 14-1 to establish beach walk access and visibility. And the second is a companion amendment to the LDRs to make sure that when development projects are reviewed, that this section is properly referenced. And the amendment to Section 14-1 states that on all oceanfront properties, there shall be no structure or planting within 25 feet of a street end or public access point to the beach walk, which obstructs pedestrian visibility between a height of 2 feet and 10 feet above the adjacent grade. So essentially, there has to be between a 2-foot minimum and maximum 10-foot gap where people would have an unobstructed sightline.
So a hedge, for example, a hedge couldn't be higher than 2 feet.
Hedges are typically higher than 2 feet within this.
But they couldn't be as part of this ordinance.
Correct.
So let me ask you this. Let's say, I don't know, what's one of the, like the W, let's say the W. What's the W's frontage on the bay walk, on the beach walk?
The W, I think, probably has close to 200 feet of frontage on the bay walk, on the beach walk.
On the beach walk. So, but this would then say, then, let's say at the beach access point, they would have to go 25 feet from a beach access point, and then 25 feet from the street end. They would have to limit their hedge to 2 feet.
Correct.
And so then you're saying then that on a property that's got a 200-foot frontage on the beach walk, you're saying, you know, you're gonna possibly have up to 75 feet where you're gonna force a private property owner to have their hedge, which a lot of times these hedges are important also, you know, for privacy in the property. You're gonna lower them to 2 feet. You know,
But to clarify.
yes.
It's not the entirety of their property, it's just for sightline purposes.
I understand
So
that. I
be-
understand.
So further set back, like it can be stepped up. So to come around the corner, it comes down to 2 feet, but you can still create the privacy and have the tall shrubs deeper in the property. So the shrub, you know, it kind of goes down and then goes
How far deep would they have to go in the property in order to go back up?
The 25
in the
foot.
hedge height.
The 25-foot requirement would apply in the case of the W from both the south side of the property, which is the public street end portion of it, as well as their beach access point. The way that this is written, I don't believe it would be 25 feet in each direction on the private beach access point, but 25 feet in total. But when you combine it with the public street end, that's close to 50 feet in total. So on
Okay, so then it's 25 feet is a radius.
Yes.
Okay, so it's not 25 feet in each direction.
No.
Okay.
The intent is a radius so that if you're standing at center point, it would be a 25-foot radius. So if you're off to either side, you would still have.
And
that
how
visibility.
wide is the average beach access point? 10 feet, 8 or 8
Most
feet?
beach access points are anywhere between 10 or sometimes 15 feet, but I'd say probably 10 feet is closer because it's
10
usually
feet.
2 gates.
And so then you would be going probably about 7.5 feet then in each direction.
Correct.
Okay, and then so you would have to then keep the height to 2 feet for, let's say, 7.5 feet of each direction of a beach access point. But how deep do you have to go before you're able to achieve height again?
It would be the same 25 feet in depth.
No, so like if I may.
Yeah, yes.
So this is the property and here are the street ends. So we're not saying their entire hedge has to be 2 feet. We're saying when you come out here, like it has to be 2 feet here, but back here it doesn't. So when you're in the property, you're not looking out over 2 foot hedge.
But what Tom is saying is that if you're within that 25-foot radius, if he answered correctly actually, because what he said is, given that there's a radius, you can't go back up in height for as long as you are within that radius. So you're in essence
But I'm saying
killing the
behind-
privacy.
No, that's not what, so maybe we need to table this.
Yeah, I think that, and I was just talking to Dave about this, it might be a good idea for us to put together some diagrams because let's say this is a 10-foot beach access point, that this is the beach access right here. You could go out 7.5 feet, but at some point where you're standing, you're going to need to see that way. If there's a hedge right up to here, you're preventing that. But the question, I think, is how deep it should go. Does it need to go 25 feet into the property? Or
It does not.
yeah, it can be a lesser amount
Yes.
and still provide that. Yeah, triangle. And so I think what we need to do is, one, bring back a diagram that shows that, and then two, have that clarified in the text of the ordinance.
Yeah, because the goal is not to limit people's privacy.
I know.
And-
I know
and-
that's not
but-
the goal.
No, I know you know,
Yeah.
but we need to make sure that that is the net takeaway too, so that it is really so that when you're coming around a corner, you don't get crushed by somebody who's coming in the opposite direction. And so we just need to clarify that. So let's continue it and work on it for the next.
Otherwise, this is going to become a paparazzi stream.
No, nobody wants that. We just want people not to like have to take their life in their hands as they.
Was this a dual referral to the planning board, or was this just to the land use committee?
No, this was a dual referral, and the amendment to chapter 14 does not require planning board approval. So that would just come back to the commission as a first reading ordinance once it clears
So
this
then let's
committee.
continue it. Let's continue it so that we can get the graphics. All right. With that, and thank you, Commissioner Bob, because it is important, and there's so many, we get so many complaints about people's safety on the beach walk, and not just the typical aspects of safety that we think of, but also the safety of people on bicycles, people on running or whatever, and they get startled, and
and as
people
we're
have
trying-
crashed into each other. So I know you really are addressing something very important, and I thank you for that. And actually, I forgot to open up the floor to anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item. I see we have a caller on Zoom. There's no name, but I assume this is Matthew. Welcome. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Yes, hi, good evening, commissioners, committee members, Matthew Goltanoff. I just want to thank Commissioner Bott for this common sense legislation to improve public safety on the beach walk. And I think your concerns that you brought up, Chair Fernandez, are well taken. And just want to make sure that everyone understands that, as you mentioned, it's about everyone being able to see everyone else, whether they're entering the beach walk or they're leaving a hotel. And the W is actually a prime example. They have multiple points of egress. And at times when the shrubbery grows thick and tall, you can't see someone coming out, and it could startle people even on foot. I think the points that you made were very well taken, and hopefully, common sense standards are applied here to help ensure everyone's safety on the beach walk. And thank you again for bringing this forth.
All right. Any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none, I think we'll continue this to the next meeting by acclamation. All right. With that, let's call, Mr. Director, item number 18.
Okay, item number 18 is review the city's modal prioritization strategy established in 2015 as part of the Transportation Master Plan.
So I'm just going to keep my comments on this very limited. I'm not going to seek to change our prioritization because I know we've been very forward-thinking, a very forward-thinking community on this, national standards, actually. I do get concerned when in the hierarchy, in the modal hierarchy, we are prioritizing freight even over private vehicles. I get prioritizing public transportation and pedestrianism. I get prioritizing bicyclists, but to prioritize big trucks over private vehicles, to me, is concerning. Now, I know it's important because it's a policy that's used for the allocation of spaces on our public streets, and we need to make sure that on our public streets we have space for trucks to pull over, to make deliveries, to avoid them blocking the flow of traffic. But I just want us to be aware this will be a problem once we
see construction of housing with no parking. It's the fact that we are encouraging people to live here in units that doesn't have parking doesn't mean that they won't use a car. Doesn't mean that they won't have a car. Doesn't mean that they won't call for an Uber. It doesn't mean that a friend won't come to visit them in a personal vehicle. And that's going to create much greater demand for on-street parking than even these freight trucks themselves. And so, it's something that we have to be aware of. Our community is going to have to prepare public parking wise to address these issues. We're going to have to build the garages. We're going to have to find funding for that and to be able to address this. But I just wanted to put that on the record because I do know how important this policy is that was adopted back in 2015, and I do understand how forward-thinking it was, and it still is important. It is still a goal that we need to reach. So I'm not going to seek to change it, but I did want to put it out there because it's something that I do want our staff to be mindful of, both at the planning department and at the transportation and parking departments of the impacts this is going to potentially have in the future. I don't know if there are any comments from the dais on this. I don't know if staff has anything to add on this. Seeing not, I see that we have a member of the public with their hand raised wishing to speak on this. You're welcome to speak. You have 2 minutes. We have someone on Zoom wishing to speak on this item. Okay. Seeing that the person is not unmuting themselves, with that, I'm going to close the public opportunity to be heard, and we can proceed to item number 19. Item actually 19 was withdrawn. Withdrawn, correct?
Correct. And Mr. Chair, just for clarity purposes, item 18 has been discussed and has now been concluded.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Director, let's introduce item number 20.
Item number 20 is to review massage therapy regulations in North Beach.
Thank you. This is an item I'm bringing forward at the request of residents. I introduced this a while back, back in September 2022. It's been through this committee, through the planning board, and I didn't want to move forward with it, sending it back to commission until we had a hearing of it in this committee, as it does relate to North Beach, and I wanted to give an opportunity to my colleagues, especially our new colleagues, and Commissioner Bott, who's from North Beach, to chime in on this. But the proposed ordinance would make restrictions on the hours applicable to massage therapy centers in the North Beach overlay, pretty much the entire area north of 63rd Street, pretty much mimicking the same hours of operation that currently exist in Ocean Terrace and the Harding Townside area. Policies that were adopted way back in 2015. And it basically what it says is that massage therapy centers cannot operate between the hours of 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. And we're doing this because in the past, we've seen unfortunate, nefarious activities occur at some of these establishments. We've seen sting operations occur in our city, in some of those types of establishments. It also proposes legislation to limit the locations of future of these establishments to state schools that are certified for massage therapy licenses, for buildings that have at least 50 units where these centers are there as an accessory use, in fitness centers and wellness centers that tend to be very legitimate, in state licensed medical offices and clinics like physical therapy centers, so that you still have the service available, but we ensure that it truly is a legitimate and safe environment. Mr. Planning Director, I don't know if there's anything else as it relates to this item that needs to be described on the record.
The only other thing I would mention is that we've also included conditional use locations for massage therapy centers, and that would be within office buildings located in a commercial district, such as the TC district or the TCC district, provided the massage therapy center is located above the first floor. And within multifamily residential buildings, apartments, suite hotels, and hotels with less than 50 units. Those could get a massage therapy license as part of the conditional use in order to better regulate the operation.
Thank you. So I'm going to open up the discussion to the dais. I value our colleagues' feedback. Commissioner Dominguez, you're recognized.
Thank you. This is a great item, and I remember all the work that you've put into it over the past year or more. And so based on what I'm reading here, Tom, this wouldn't apply to like the Carillon or hotels of that size.
That's correct. They would continue to be allowed to have massage therapy centers.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the dais? Commissioner Bond.
Yeah, so obviously I know how long and hard you've been working on this, and we all know that there are some really unsavory characters operating ostensibly as massage centers. What I'm trying to figure out how this would work, just down the street from City Hall, we have a Massage Envy franchise. And they are all over the country, and they're generally in retail locations, not on the second floor. So and maybe I'm just not reading this correctly. So if a Massage Envy franchisee wanted to open a location in North Beach, they would not be able to unless they were in a multifamily residential building or in an office building above the ground floor when a lot of their businesses walk in. Am I understanding that correctly?
So it would be permitted anywhere in a multifamily residential building, apartment hotel, suite hotel, or hotel with at least 50 rooms as an accessory use. There wouldn't be any
Right, but that's
location.
not generally the locations they
But
have.
in terms of the commercial buildings, so within office buildings located in a commercial district, or the TCC district or the TCC district, conditional use would be required if the massage therapy center is located above the first floor.
Let me ask you this, because Commissioner Bond does bring up a good point. And I think we have a number of safeguards here to protect from nefarious establishments. We want to make sure that we get good commercial and certain retails that could be vacant, and there's nothing wrong with a massage therapy center. There's nothing wrong with a Massage Envy. And perhaps maybe under the conditional uses, we can allow ground floor, centers and retail uses, but as a conditional use. And really what I hope out of the conditional use is that there's, proper vetting, not the typical operational vetting that goes into a conditional use permit of, flow and deliveries and parking and that, but actually safety vetting, we're actually who is this operator? Is this a reputable operator and that type of stuff?
So I think that the recommendation would be to just remove the line that says, provided the massage therapy center is located above the first floor. So it would be CUP approval, but it would allow it at the first floor as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd be open to that. All right. Any other comments from the dais? Are there members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none in person, none in Zoom, can we show this item as adopted? All right.
As amended.
As amended.
Okay.
And this already went to the planning board, is that correct?
Actually, this has been approved at first reading, so it was referred back to the land use committee prior to second reading, so we can bring this to the commission for second reading on October 30th with this change.
Okay, great. Thank you.
It's only been how many years?
Oh my God, a long time. I was waiting for Commissioner Bott to make her way to the dais. I knew that the day would come that Commissioner Bott would be sitting here as the commissioner to be able to review the policy with her.
All right, with that, let's go to item number 21.
Okay, item number 21 is North Beach Comprehensive Use Regulations.
All right, this is an item I placed on the agenda, establishing a new overlay, again, similar to the last item, that would apply to all areas located north of north of 63rd Street. It does a number of things. The first thing that it does is that it addresses those establishments that we've come to know as nuisance uses. Earlier, we were talking about the MXC, and the MXC down in South Beach as opposed to the MXC in North Beach. And one of the things we've done to try to fix the MXC down in South Beach was to create a number of prohibited uses. The tobacco and vape dealers. You know, there's times you go block by block and you have multiple tobacco and vape dealers block after block, and it starts to define the character of the area. The same thing with the vitamin stores. And by vitamin stores, why are we addressing vitamin stores? You know, people are probably asking, why would a city commissioner not want you to go get vitamins? Well, the problem is that, you know, a lot of these, you know, shady type of CBD places where you don't know what they're really selling, operate under the guise of vitamin shops. In fact, there was an issue that we had in South Beach, that we had a so-called vitamin shop selling pot to underage children, and there had to be an undercover investigation. They got shut down, and it actually uncovered a much bigger and wider problem. Pawn shops. Pawn shops is one of the establishments that would be prohibited under this overlay, and these, you know, these souvenir t-shirt shops that we see, that they open up, you know, one next to each other, and start to also define the character of the area. The ones that are existing can stay there. They become legal non-conforming. But new ones won't be able to open up. And so we're trying to address this issue, that block after block getting defined by these establishments that aren't really contributing to the retail vibrancy and the type of economic activity that areas that are emerging and thriving and have a bright future like North Beach deserve. Other uses that have been identified as problematic, if there are too many, are packaged liquor stores. We're not making them illegal, but we're saying no more than 6 in the area. Currently, there are 6, and we're saying let's keep them at 6. We're saying check cashing stores. We know check cashing stores play an important role in the vibrancy of our community. There's a lot of lower income individuals that depend on them. Currently, there's 2, and we're saying no more than 4. So there's still room for more, but we just want to put a cap on them so that we don't have the issue that we have on Washington Avenue. They have liquor store, you know, convenience store, check cashing store, tattoo parlors, block after block. Convenience stores, currently there's 16 to 19 existing. We're capping them to 25. And I just want to clarify, convenience stores doesn't mean supermarket, doesn't mean bodegas, and we're not outlawing any of those. We're saying convenience stores, which are like 7-Elevens, Walgreens, CVS, and others, they're still legal. You can continue to have them. We're just saying, in order to promote vibrancy in retail options, we're going to cap them at 25. And we continue to encourage, I would love to have, you know, more supermarket options in North Beach, including bodegas. And so this does not address that, and never has sought to address that. Tattoo studios. Right now, there's 9 existing in North Beach, and this would propose a limit of 9 in North Beach. Again, because you don't want the area to be filled with tattoo studios. We're not saying make them illegal in any way. We're just saying, you know, we want also, you know, other diversity of businesses. That's the gist of what this does.
we want to preserve, you know, the packaged liquor store that's there and the check cashing store and the convenience store that people love because they can run out of their home and go grab something. And we want to keep those artistic tattoo studios that people enjoy, but we don't want to create a proliferation of it so that we can have it in a moderate amount that doesn't start to define the area. That's what this item does. I'm going to open up the floor to my colleagues, and then afterwards I'll open up the floor to the public. Commissioner Suarez, you're recognized.
I think this is a great item. I appreciate your forethought. I think even before I was elected, when you were on the planning board, you brought this issue or you discussed it. And I think this is a great step for North Beach to modernize. And I'm fully supportive, and I'll move the item.
Thank you. I'll second the item. Any other comments from the dais? All right. Commissioner Dominguez, no? All right. I see Elizabeth Latone has her hand raised in Zoom, and if anyone from the public wishes to speak, you can raise your hand on Zoom or come to the podium. Elizabeth, you have 2 minutes to
Hi.
speak.
Good afternoon, everyone. Commissioner Fernandez, thank you so much for bringing this. I know that we have talked about this for 2 years, and we're desperate to have some distance separation from these types of nuisance businesses. And I appreciate you doing this. Thank you.
And we'll work on the retail lighting up in North Beach, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. With that, there's a motion on the table that is seconded by the chair. We can show this item adopted by acclamation. Thank you, colleagues. I appreciate it.
And Chair, thank you
Yes.
for doing the work on this over the last number of years and getting it done.
It's teamwork. Everything is always teamwork. And actually, I want to thank Commissioner Dominguez because under the last iteration of the Land Use Committee, some of this was about to get sidetracked and not moving in the right direction. I happened to be out of town for that Land Use Committee meeting. Commissioner Dominguez actually was able to save the item and for me, and so Commissioner Dominguez, all these years later, thank you so much for since we're in the sunshine, and I can tell you thank you for that. Thank you for saving this item so we can move it forward. All right, colleagues.
2 items left.
2 items left. Yes, we're in the final stretch. Mr. Director, let's call item number 22.
Okay, item number 22 is review amendments to the land development regulations to amend the hotel approval process.
This is Commissioner Magazine's item, and we have the pleasure of having Commissioner Magazine in the house. So Commissioner Magazine, I'm going to recognize you to present your item.
Yeah, Tom, do you, I'll get set. I thought I'd get settled in. Do you want to tee this up and I'll give a presentation after?
Sure, I'd be happy to. This item was last discussed by the Land Use Committee on May 1st, on June 10th. And when the item was discussed at June 10th, the administration was requested to come back with a draft process in the form of an ordinance based upon certain criteria, which included city commission review occurring at the beginning of the approval process, that the commission approval would apply to non-oceanfront and non-waterfront hotel projects, and then to use item 2 identified in the land use memo options for the June meeting as a base. And lastly, the commission requested that the review criteria include impacts on residential uses. The attached ordinance establishes a hotel approval process in the form of a commission warrant. And basically what would happen is if a hotel use is authorized in a particular zoning or overlay district, they would first need to make application to the city commission prior to the review by any land use board. And that would either be the planning board if required, and the design review or historic preservation board as applicable. And it would include the approval of any building permit for hotel projects that exceed the following thresholds. First, new hotel construction that exceeds 15,000 square feet of floor area, or new hotel construction exceeding 30 hotel units, or the conversion of more than 25 existing residential apartments or more than 5,000 square feet of office or commercial space within a single development site to hotel, suite hotel, or hostel. The exemptions include hotels proposed to be located on a bayfront or oceanfront property, or if a hotel is proposed within an existing contributing building within a local historic district, provided that any new addition contain no more than 50 hotel units. The warrant would be reviewed and potentially granted by the commission via resolution, and it would require an affirmative vote of 5/7 of all members of the commission in order to approve the resolution. This would be done as part of a public hearing, which would occur prior to the acceptance of an application to the Planning Board, Design Review Board, or Historic Preservation Board. So the commission would need to approve the resolution granting the warrant before an application to a land use board could be made. Lastly, in reviewing the application for a commission warrant, we have identified criteria that the commission would follow in determining whether or not to grant the warrant. There are 9 criteria that have been identified, and they include compatibility, impacts on affordable and workforce housing, proximity to residential uses, whether adequate off-street parking has been provided, the impact of employees of the hotel development on the demand in the city for housing, public transit, and childcare, impact of hotel on existing infrastructure, whether or not the applicant has taken measures to employ residents of neighborhoods adjoining the hotel, whether the applicant will take measures to encourage hotel workers and guests to use public transportation, and whether the hotel development will support small businesses in the immediate area. If there's consensus on this or other options, the Land Use Committee can make a recommendation to the commission to refer the ordinance to the Planning Board.
Thank you for that, Tom. And the intent on this and what we discussed before is very much in line with what we've been talking about prior to this item here, and that is finding housing for the missing middle, right? And essentially how I envision this is if an applicant comes and they're able to build a hotel as of right, we start early in the process and say, well, we understand that a city must grow or die, but we want to grow in a smart, responsible way. And I think collectively we all see and say, maybe except for more sporadic uses like along the ocean front or bayfront, where that's not going to be used for full-time residents anyway. Let's grow through a residential population as opposed to more transient usages. So this provides just a further safeguard. It gives us the opportunity to kind of get out in front. A great example, and this isn't denigrating the properties in any way whatsoever, but for an infill project like where the hotels are along 5th Street corridor, right? Fine products, but I would much rather say early on in the process, you know what, that's kind of in the middle of, yes, it's on a corridor, but it's abutting residential neighborhoods to both sides. How can we work with this project applicant to essentially turn this hotel that they're able to build as of right into a more conducive residential project that I think we all wish and desire to see. So that's where this item stems from. Since this was first proposed, we have made progress in, kind of putting further incentives to residential usages, and it's in the pipeline to cut back on some of the incentives for hotels. So maybe, some of those things kind of take care of itself, but I do think that this is another prudent safeguard.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I just have a question. I love this item. I think this item is great, and I'm going to support it. If anything, I would like it to be strengthened a little bit.
With the size in the units?
So for example, the following hotel developments would not be required to seek a commission warrant. It would be a hotel located on a bayfront or oceanfront property. I completely get the oceanfront because that's where we usually have our larger hotels. But on the bayfront, you still have certain areas in our
Yeah.
bayfront, you know, especially areas in North Beach. You have areas, you could potentially even have certain hotels that are bayfront on Belle Isle. I think, what are some other areas, Tom? I know not West Avenue, because in West Avenue, we have the overlay that prohibits it, as well as in Sunset Harbor, where we have a vision plan that prohibits it. But I think Belle Isle, we could potentially have a hotel. Someone come in, a corporation come in, buy up a building, and convert it to hotel, right?
Yeah, the south side of Belle Isle is owned RM2, which currently permits hotels.
And how about areas like in North Beach?
In North Beach, there's limited areas that are zoned RM2 that could potentially have limited bayfront exposure.
So if you would, if just as a friendly amendment, I would suggest keeping bayfront properties as part of those having to come to the commission.
I'd be happy with that. In fact, it was probably my fault. I said waterfront, and I was actually envisioning oceanfront because that's where my mind went, and staff rightfully so kind of took me literal with my words, but I was envisioning oceanfront. While we're on the term of strengthening it, if I could just ask staff of one thing. Tom, some of the smaller hotels seem to be excluded. And in fact, that's somewhat where my worry lies, because that's what comes down in the middle of a lot of our residential areas. I don't know the square footage of this, but another great example for where this ordinance would have been useful is in the Sunset Harbor situation, where if they would have come to the commission before all those plans were in place, we would have been able to negotiate a better deal that's more conducive for the neighborhood there. But in terms of not limited or not including the smaller scale hotels, I think you said under 15,000 square feet?
Yeah, the draft that we had come up with, and again, this draft was for purposes of facilitating this discussion. And so to the extent we need to fine tune this at the committee level, we can certainly include and incorporate whatever amendments are approved here in the ordinance that we bring to the commission for referral to the planning board. But what we had suggested as kind of a starting point would be if hotels were under new construction that was under 15,000 square feet of floor area. So that would be a small hotel on, say, a 7,500 square foot lot in the RM2 district. To the extent you think that needs to be modified and it should be even smaller in order to get the exemption, we can certainly do that.
That's where I would lean, because I think some of the problems where we see in the hotels, it's not the larger ones that are waterfront or even along Alton Road, but it is a small one that pops up on 6th Street or, you know, in the middle of Flamingo Park or in the middle of Collins Park.
Commissioner, you picked up on one of the points I was going to mention, because, you know, it does mention that exempt from this requirement would be hotel proposed within an existing contributing building within a local historic district, provided that any new addition contain no more than 50 hotel units. So when we think about it, that is usually where our most attainable, affordable, even Section 8 housing is. Let's think an example of that, I think, was the Riviera Apartments. The Riviera Apartments would have been protected through a warrant process, would have come to us. Had the policy existed. So you're proposing this second bullet that says hotels proposed within an existing contributing building within a local historic district, provided that any new addition contain no more than 50 hotel units, no longer be exempted, and that those have to come to the city commission. Okay, I agree with that.
Okay, and so what we'll do is we'll remove that in total. So even if you're a contributing building in an historic district, you still, if you want to convert to a hotel, you've got to come to the commission.
Of course, that's, yeah.
We're removing Bayfront, yes.
And it just seems to make sense, because that is where I think we truly are seeing our greatest displacement, very vulnerable areas. Commissioner Magazine, amazing work. And thank you for looking out for those who have housing insecurity in our community, and for your very reasonable amendments.
And before you move this, just for clarity purposes, I'm going to adjust the ordinance so that, in terms of the exemptions, the only exemption will be a hotel that is proposed to be located on an oceanfront property.
And I think that that makes perfect sense.
Okay.
That is where we have historically in our city had, this type of hotel development.
And Commissioner Magazine, do you want us to leave the applicability thresholds in place, which would be new hotel construction exceeding 15,000 square feet of floor area, or is that something you'd also like to adjust as well?
I know this is kind of just sticking my finger in the air, but I would like to see it lower.
Okay.
Because I think where some of our problems are next to Commissioner Suarez's house, where, one of these small boutique, maybe not a hotel in that instance, but it could be a similar situation. Those are the things that we don't want slipping under the radar.
Okay.
I think that there is, an urgency for an item of this nature, since this was not a dual referral, correct?
Correct.
Commissioner Magazine, I guess it's your item. I think it would be prudent to request that this item be included as a referral to the planning board at next week's meeting, because I do think this is very important to the quality of life of so many of our residents being pushed out of our city. So would you agree to, if our staff requests for this to be placed at
Yep.
next week's agenda?
Yep, of course.
All right. And we can do that, Mr. Attorney?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and then, so for the, since we're gonna be moving this forward pretty quickly, do you want to go ahead and reduce the applicability from hotels exceeding 15,000 square feet to hotels exceeding 5,000 square feet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And Tom, just to make sure that, I know we've had issues where things that are part of the way through the approval process get caught up. That's not my intent, is to derail any projects that, have essentially already been planned for. This is planning for, stealing my friend and colleague's Commissioner about the city that we want to see, and not looking to derail anything where there's already been time and money spent on.
And then in terms of the other two provisions in the applicability, is leaving new hotel construction exceeding 30 hotel units, or do you think 30 should be a lower threshold as well?
Yeah, that's the same premise of the square footage.
Okay, so maybe 10 hotel units? Okay, and then the last one would be.
I mean, Tom, not to beat around the bush, I'll just be out front. Is there a reason why we have any lower floor limit?
No, this was something that
Let's
was.
scrap it. I mean, that's what I'd like to do. If you're building a two-room
Okay.
hotel, you could come to the
Then
commission for approval.
It will be,
You're
and
taking
literally
away
any
housing
hotel.
inventory.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep,
Yeah.
okay.
I agree.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'll be brief, but I know when this came up at a prior land use meeting, I advised the committee that when the commission is reviewing one of these requests, you'll be sitting in a quasi judicial capacity like the land use boards do. So you'll be required to keep track of any ex parte communications. Your decisions will have to be based on the review criteria in the ordinance. And there will be, a presentation by the applicant, public hearing in support or opposition, and a rebuttal. So those will be treated like quasi judicial hearings that you're accustomed to seeing before the land use boards.
I didn't take you serious when you said it without the beard, but that hit home.
And so, Mr. Attorney, let me just ask you for the record. When an agency sits in a quasi judicial capacity, whether it be our agency or another agency like the planning board, they have to adhere to review criteria. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And in this case, one of the review criteria is whether the hotel will negatively affect the availability of existing affordable or workforce housing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted that for the record. I like it when we get to consider the impact on housing. Last item, number 23, Mr. Director.
Okay, and then the last one, we'll show that done by acclamation, and we will do our best to get this on as a supplemental for the September 11th City Commission meeting.
Thank you.
Item number 23, consider the creation of a new capital project to install floating walkways and/or the acquisition of the outlot at 2811 Indian Creek Drive to complete the Indian Creek pedestrian pathway.
Thank you, Mr. Director. I think you're probably all sick hearing me talk about the Indian Creek pathway. The public invested a great amount of money in doing this beautiful area that it's this beautiful promenade along the Indian Creek Canal waterway that goes from 24th Street almost all the way to 41st Street. A number of property owners, actually all property owners in a segment of it, except for one, gave easements to the city to accommodate this pathway. And now what's happened is that you have the pathway, you have one property owner that didn't give the easement, and then you have a bridge. And for people to get from the pathway back onto the sidewalk, they have to walk on a seawall, which is highly unsafe, get off the seawall into a 2-foot right-of-way to get back onto the sidewalk. It is the most unsafe and selfish thing to their neighbors that this property owner has done. And the most offensive part of it, is that the taxpayers paid to have this property owner's seawall fixed. All the other property owners that gave the easement and had their seawall fixed. And this person had their seawall fixed and modernized by the taxpayers of the city of Miami Beach, and this person is now creating an unsafe environment for every pedestrian that's on that walkway that has to get on a seawall in order to access the public right-of-way again. And our city and our residents deserve something better and safer, so I am going to pass this off to our interim assistant city manager, David Martinez, to guide us on what the administration is recommending. I know you've been looking at possible eminent domain proceedings to take over this property and create the level of connectivity that the public deserves.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that. I'll introduce the discussion and I'll let the Public Works team fill in the blanks. So yes, this is something that's been going on for quite some time, and we have not been successful, obviously, in working any kind of arrangement or deal with this property owner. I know that the Public Works teams, as well as our city attorney's office, have been in touch with the property owner to try to work something out amicably. The property we're talking about, of course, is strictly the property on the water side of Indian Creek, on the west side of Indian Creek. We're not talking about the property, the folio property on the east side of Indian Creek. So with that, I'm going to let Brad Kane tell us a little bit about where we've gotten and what our next steps look like.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Fernandez, fellow commissioners. We've had discussions, as our Assistant City Manager Martinez said, with the property owner. Unfortunately, as you stated before, he is not willing to give an easement. He is not willing to do a quick claim deed, as other homeowners have done along Indian Creek.
And has he blocked the public's access from his property?
Not to my knowledge, I can't speak to that.
There's a gate, there's a fence around his.
Yes, there's a fence.
Yeah.
But there are a few options that we're at this point that we can only do at this point to try to get this public benefit to our residents. I will let John Carlo, who is Assistant City Engineer, talk about some of those, and we'll see where we can go.
Yeah. So like Brad mentioned, we're looking at different options. One of those
Carlo, come to the podium.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Yeah, we look at different options, and I think the path forward will be to try to purchase an easement, a 6-foot easement. That's the option that we would like to entertain and get an appraisal and to make sure if it's possible, and that will be one of the options that will allow us to have the 6-foot path that is continues to have that section.
Consistent,
bridge.
consistent with the rest of the pathway.
Exactly. We currently have a 6-foot pathway, so that's the intention to just purchase that. And just to put on the record, we do have an easement, but it's a utility easement that goes through that property. So the value of that, we'll see what comes when we request it. But already we have an utility easement. It's not an above ground easement, but still there's, you know, limitations that property can do in terms of building and in the future. So that, you know, may be a factor for us in terms of how much we have to pay for the. For that.
So just to put this to clarify for the public, this is the out parcel,
Yes.
the strip of land on the west side of Indian Creek across from 2811 Indian Creek. We're not looking to eminent domain the entire property, is that correct?
That'll be the next step if it's not
No,
possible.
we're not looking to eminent domain the entire property.
Just the outline. Just the outline.
We're only looking to do an eminent domain on the outlot, which is a small strip of land, and we're looking to eminent domain an easement.
Yes.
It's not even to eminent domain the entire outlot. It's to do an eminent domain for an easement. Is that correct, Mr. Attorney?
That's correct, for a 6-foot,
6 foot.
6 foot wide.
Continues the path. Yes.
Okay,
That'll be the first one. Yeah.
okay. What action does the city administration, the city attorney's office need from this committee and from the city commission to get this done?
If the committee is inclined to move forward, you could you could make the same recommendation that the finance committee made when this was heard by finance in June, which would be to recommend that the commission authorize the administration and the city attorney's office to continue to negotiate with the owner of 2811, and if those negotiations are unsuccessful, then to have the city attorney take the next steps toward filing an eminent domain proceeding. But the important thing is that it's in everybody's interest to try to achieve a negotiated settlement here without filing suit. So I think our initial recommendation is still to try to negotiate with the owner, and if that's unsuccessful, then we would proceed.
But we've made contact with the owner. Is that correct, Mr. Director?
Yes, that's correct. We have done, but it was only for an easement, but not purchasing. We're talking about now we're gonna purchase the easement instead of him give us an easement or a quick claim deed. So.
Well, we're not looking to purchase the easement. We're looking to eminent domain the easement. And one thing is to purchase in the market, and another thing is to eminent domain. And this is for a public purpose where people's safety are being endangered. We create these pathways to promote pedestrianism, to promote safety in the way that our residents are able to get around our city. But in this case, something that's supposed to be for the safety, for the welfare, for the good of the taxpaying public, this one property owner is now forcing the public to get on a seawall. Imagine a handicapped person. Imagine an elderly person. Imagine someone that just trips. It is so infuriating and it's so wrong that someone benefited for their personal property from the taxpayer's dollar. That their seawall got fixed, and it's expensive it's over over $1,000 a linear foot, probably over $1,200 a linear foot to fix a seawall.
Yeah, that's in the general ballpark, yes.
And that now there's this same person is the one that is putting our residents and those pedestrians in danger. Commissioner Suarez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Who is the property owner again?
I think it's owned through a corporate entity, but I don't know who the principal.
I believe it's Alan Wasserstein is the owner of the property.
Is that the same relative of Jose Smith?
I
was just.
I have no knowledge of that firsthand.
I mean, is there any way, because he's a resident of Miami Beach, is there any way that we can contact Jose to hopefully broker a deal here? Because certainly we do not want to, we would rather go through a negotiation and purchase it instead of eminent domain, right? Maybe we need to bring as many parties together as possible to really hash out a deal here.
But here's the thing. When you do a private purchase, you usually pay a premium, especially when the selling entity isn't looking to sell and the buying entity is approaching the seller. When you eminent domain, you're paying the publicly assessed value by the property appraisers. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Attorney.
Well, in either event, the city would have to pay for this property, right? Whether we negotiate a price with the
Understood.
property owner or whether we initiate the process for
That's
eminent
not what
domain.
I'm asking.
Eminent domain carries other costs too. It's costs that just inherent in the litigation, in the types of attorneys who handle that work. So I think, and that's why, I think the recommendation is still to try to negotiate a price with the property owner first, because we're going to be paying anyway.
If you can allow me to finish, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
thank you. In some instances, whenever the judge is going to decide what the price is going to be, if I'm not mistaken, and that may or may not be higher than the value of the assessed value, and so that's why I would encourage bringing all relative parties to the table and trying to just make sure we get this last deal hashed out. What is the last sticking point on their negotiation? What do they want?
I think they just want to be compensated. I think there's.
So what was the last offer?
I was not involved in any, actual
We never
numbers of that.
offered, we never offered money for these lots, for these lots that we obtained in the past. It was given to the city through a quitclaim deed or an easement, so it wasn't money for the remaining lots. We just gave them the ability to have a dock. Basically, they still have the ability to build a dock in the future if they want to have water access. They still have that right as part of the negotiation with the city.
So, but correct me if I'm wrong. Where are we when negotiating? I mean, what was our position? What was their position? Did they just are adamant on not selling, or they have a certain price in mind?
I could probably tell you they probably have a number in mind. We didn't get that far. We really just wanted to revisit the issues. Firstly, if he was willing to do a quick plain deed or he was willing to do an easement. We also notified him that, this was not going to be, if any type of eminent domain was done, it would not be the whole parcel. It was just a portion, of the out parcel that we'd be looking to do. And, he seemed to be okay with, that if the eminent domain process happened as it related to that. But it's a monetary issue.
Right. And I just want to caution, just because we eminent domain something, they may get more money.
No, I don't think so. I've seen plenty of eminent domain proceedings at the, that we've had to approve at the county. Not we, but. It's usually it's not the same thing that they'll get on the market.
Right, it's waterfront. I mean, that is something to consider. So, but let's assume that we do eminent domain. Do we still have the option to go through with it? Like, let's say the assessed value comes back and it's more, the eminent domain value that a judge rules is more than the assessed value. Do we still have any options, or do we have to follow through with the eminent domain? Like, what if it's something ridiculous where it's like $5 million over the asking price?
I mean, eminent domain is a highly regulated process. There is a mandatory pre-suit negotiation process that would come first. So it's only assuming, that we did not reach a resolution at that phase that we would proceed to litigation. And it's, it's litigation like any other, right? I mean, we'd be arguing over the value of the property.
Would it be possible through the chair, maybe we invite the property owner to the next land use meeting?
Sure. Well, I frankly, I'd rather not do that. Because this may end up being a legal process. I'd rather speak through our attorneys. Let me ask this, where are we in the process of obtaining appraisals on the easements?
That's the next step. That's what we're gonna do now.
Have we requested those?
I don't think so this time.
I don't understand. I just don't understand how 2 weeks ago, I was told that we were going to request appraisals, and here we are 2 weeks later. Why has there not been an appraisal ordered?
I can't speak to that, Mr. Chairman. But my understanding is that since every other property along this stretch has worked with the city and has granted easements to the city or quitclaim deeds for these properties, the reason this is before you is because the administration needs authorization from the city commission to formally approach.
And
this property owner, so to negotiate, no, to negotiate, to pay for an interest in the property. This would be
Okay,
the
so
first
for
one.
whatever we do, we're gonna need an appraisal, and I want to know,
That's
why
correct.
have we not requested the appraisal that I was told over 2 weeks ago that was going to be requested? Why has that not been requested? Who was supposed to request it, and why didn't they request it?
I will ask our Public Works Department what the process for you to obtain an appraisal is and the cost, et cetera.
Good afternoon, Gisela Torres from the City Attorney's Office. We researched the formula for calculating value specifically for eminent domain, which is a little different. It can encompass, fair market is a little different in eminent domain. So we prepared the scope for Public Works to order it, and we just gave it to them, I want to say like 2 or 3 days ago.
Okay.
So they have to now go through the
Understood.
process of, bidding it out for 3 different appraisers, a cost, and that. It's a
Okay.
little bit of a process to actually get the signed retainer for the appraiser.
Okay. So, Mr. Attorney, put me on the proper posture so that we can do the most appropriate motion. given-
Based on the discussion, I would recommend making the similar motion to what the Finance Committee made, which would be to recommend that the City Commission authorize the administration and our office to negotiate with the property owner. If those negotiations are unsuccessful, then we could proceed to the next step.
I'll make the motion.
And I'll second it, and please, let's put there that once you communicate with them, and whether they're successful or not, that an LTC be issued, giving us an update. Okay? Thank you, colleagues, for that.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr.
Yes.
Chair, with that, will that conclude that item,
That-
based upon?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because we have to make a motion that goes to the city commission. It'd be great if we could somehow get that on next week's agenda, if possible. I don't think it's a complicated item. And also, I just want to make sure I didn't misspeak earlier. I want to make sure it's clear on the record. The 40th Street overlay item, that was not withdrawn, that was deferred. And so I just want to make sure that the record is clear on that.
Yeah, and we have that down as a future item.
Okay, great. And Mr. Director, I think that concludes our agenda.
It does.
All right. Well, colleagues, thank you very much for your for your good work, Mr. Attorney, Mr. Director, Mr. Assistant City Manager. Thank you all for your support, and to the members of the public who participated. Have a good night.